Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Audio Fanfics and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto Uzumaki accepted a deal that changed everything and faced a female Itachi Uchiha, Naruto times Itachi times Kurama, Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Naruto sighed as he leaned against the wall of his apartment looking at the picture of Team 7 when it first started and said, I'm tired of this shit. 22 years now, 22 years of trying to prove these people who I am and they do this. Flashback. Naruto sighed as he looked at the necklace Tsunade gave him. She had passed away 2 days ago and had trained Naruto to be Rokudaime Hokage. He was sworn in this morning and everyone cheered and that's when it happened. He stood in front of the village to make his speech when the council walks up and Anos, a civilian who was head of the council, sorry to interrupt you Hokage but we had a vote yesterday and we have come to a decision. Sasuke Uchiha is now the next Hokage and will replace you in an hour. Thank you. And they smiled turning and walked away while the entire village except for those of the Rookie 9 and Guy's team that had befriended him started to laugh at him. Flashback end. Yes. Sasuke was brought back with the downfall of Akatsuki and then after all the truth was revealed about who the real leader was. It was a costly battle for the leaf. Though during the massive battle Itachi's body was completely destroyed and Sasuke was given a warning not to do it again and had to work at the academy for 1 day was all his punishment he had. Sakura who at the time was his fiancée broke up with Naruto and had married Sasuke being the good little bitch she is only for him to get rid of her after finding out she could not have kids due to the battle with Akatsuki. Ino and Choji had got married but divorced seeing as they never could get past petty differences on looks. Neji and Tenten dated but nothing happened as the Hyuga council forbid them from seeing each other romantically. Shikamaru and Tamari dated until Shikamaru died though Tamari said they were calling it off. Long distance and his lazy attitude hurt their relationship. Hinata had surprisingly married Shino and was the only one who had a decent life though she did receive that damn seal. Naruto sighed and said, I'm tired of this shit and most of all I'm tired of being lonely. I wish I could do it over again. I wish you were here. Little did he know a certain fox was about to make that come true. Naruto closed his eyes and suddenly opened them as a strong burning pain covered his body and he screamed out from the pain only to pass out a little later. Naruto groaned as he slowly opened his eyes and felt something heavy on his chest. He looked down and saw a pair of red eyes looking up at him and a face he could say belonged to an angel. She had long black hair that went to her back and her lips were ruby red. Her looks were almost as good as Kurenai before she had a baby. She looked at him and smiled which he returned but wondered who she was and why was she here. She looked at him and said, Hello, Kit. Naruto blinked and said, Do, I know you. The woman smiled and said, Oh, I only been sealed in you for 22 years. It's me Kyuubi or rather my human form. I got a proposition for you. Naruto rubbed his eyes and shook his head and said, I thought you just said you were Kyuubi. Kyuubi's sweat dropped and said, I did. Naruto nods and said, That's it, I'm dead. Come and get me Shinigami. Kyuubi slapped him upside the head making him look at her and she said, Listen, how would you like the chance to see Tsunade and Jiraiya alive again as well as to change history and do things your way? Naruto narrowed his eyes and said, I'm listening. Kyuubi said, My deal is simple. I hate this village but I don't want to see it destroyed anymore but instead I want to see it kiss your feet. I also have come to respect you over the years so I am willing to use my power to do something that will get me in trouble unless you agree to my terms and then we can do it and you can see them again. Naruto said, What exactly are your terms? Kyuubi said, I want you to be my mate and the new Kyuubi and King of Demons. In return I will send you back in time to the day I was sealed in you with all your knowledge but I will also help you get your revenge however you want. So say you wanted to create a new hidden village that will become the strongest in the world I can help you do it and guess what the best part of it would be? You can pick anyone you want to be members of this village, even if they are dead, say like your mother and father. So say you want Jiraiya and Tsunade, bingo, we ask them and if they agree then boom they're back alive at the same day I bring you back to though there is a little more to it that I will explain in detail. Think about it. You can bring you mom and dad back to life as well as anyone else you want from any timeline. Normally this would get me in trouble but when an immortal has a wedding they are given a certain allowance to fuck the rules so are you interested? Naruto asked. Not that I agree yet, but what do I have to do then? Will I be in my baby body or will I be in this body or what? Kyuubi said. Oh, you will be in your baby body, but I will change it the moment I am sealed in you, so that way you will be a demon then and I will be just as I am now, except once I make you a demon we mark each other as mates and I can leave the seal as you wish and I will act as acting cage of whatever village you want to create or your own personal secretary to help you torture anyone you want to get revenge on. It's all up to you, and I can even give you a bloodline if you want it. Naruto thought a moment and said, what about if say I wanted to do something different, including the new hidden village? Say for example Konoha out from under their feet. What would you say? Or perhaps find her? Kyuubi said, whatever makes you happy. As she liked that evil glint Naruto had in his eyes. Naruto rubbed his hands and said, perfect, as he started to do an evil laugh that would make Orochimaru proud or run for his life. Some time later, a little infant was sleeping in a crib in the Hokage tower when a woman with green hair and red eyes walked into his office and said, hello Hokage-sama. The third looked up and said, yes, how can I help you, miss? The woman was dressed to look like a professional business woman said, I have come on behalf of my boss, a Mr. Nunkase, and he has asked me to offer a deal to help Konoha to recover some more after the incident that happened 6 months ago with the Kyuubi attack. The third said, really? Tell me more. As he looked to make sure the baby was asleep. The woman looked and said, my employer has agreed to buy 4 square blocks worth of building and land in the ruined section of Konoha and have them repaired and made even better than before, but he want to make it where that all businesses and buildings in those areas cannot be touched by the council. The third narrowed his eyes and said, why is that? The woman said, because my boss has helped several villages out in times of need like Konoha is now, but he does not like councils because every time they get involved either someone gets greedy and try and tax the people that live there or hinder work in that area because they want to take credit for what he does and winds up destroying what he has taken time to help make better. One such time was in a town called Ramantopia. Naruto giggled in his crib at that, making both look at him as he rolled over away from them asleep. The third sighed and said, I guess that I can understand where he is coming from, miss. The woman said, my name is Vixen. As she smiled. The third blinked and said, that's an unusual name. The woman smiled and said, I had an accident many years ago that caused me to lose my memory. My boss found me and nursed me back to health, and the only thing I had on me besides my cloths was a jacket that had a vixen painted on it. My boss gave me that as a nickname until I could hopefully remember, which I never did. Since then I just kept the name as a way to remember where I started out from. The third nods and said, so Miss Vixen, when can I meet your employer and finalize the deal? Vixen reached into a pocket and pulled out a scroll and said, here is the contract as well as the actual location that he wants as well as a pretty generous check for the property. The third opened it and read and found everything was in order and looked at the check and got wide-eyed and said, I agree with the terms. Vixen nods and said, it's a pleasure to do business with you. I will be Mr. Kaza's official representative here in Konoha most of the time until he decides to visit and check up on the progress or unless I have to leave for other business. The third nods and said, welcome to Konoha, Ms. Vixen. Vixen shakes his hand and said, thanks, and you have a cute grandson there. The third laughed and said, he's not my grandson, but I look at him as if he was. Vixen said, that's sweet, but if he's not your grandson, who is he? I can't see someone as busy as the cage of a village running a babysitting service out of his office. As she looked at Naruto. The third said, he's an orphan with a burden. Vixen thought a moment and said, so he's the one everyone in the village has been whispering about. Can't they see he is just a child and not that? The third said, how do you know about that? Narrowing his eyes. Vixen sighed and said, simple. I arrived last night and got a hotel room and went out to get something to eat and a sip of wine to drink when I heard a bunch of people discussing it. Both civilian and shinobi. The third looked down and said, I wish people would understand. Vixen walked over and picked up Naruto and held him in her arms and said, he's so innocent. Looking at the third, and then a vein appeared on her forehead as the infant grabbed her breast through her shirt and pinched her nipple. The third sweat dropped and thought, thank God Kushina dead, because if she was not, she would kill not only Minato but Jiraiya and maybe me also. Vixen said, I think he's hungry. As she looked around for a bottle only to moan as the baby squeezed harder on her nipple. The third gave a perverted giggle and said, I think he likes you. Vixen asked, are you reading that pink book to him as bedtime stories or something? In a dangerous tone as she points to the book sticking out from under a pile of scrolls. The third knew that tone as a woman who was about to bash a pervert and said, no, of course not. Vixen asked, you said he's an orphan, correct? The third said, yes, why? Vixen looked at Naruto and said, well, I was thinking since you are busy running the village I could be his babysitter from time to time. I would just have to wait until the workers finished with the new upgrades to the building and all to move in and take care of him. The third asked, why would you want to? Naruto chose this moment since he had a perfect shot to pull down the front of his diaper and started pissing on the Hokage's desk and paperwork. However, there was an object hidden in a genjutsu between the desk and Naruto, which just happened to have been a Anbu in a dog mask who was reading a certain book, and from the angle of the piss it not only hit his mask but fell onto his book, making him scream out and run out of the room. The third looked at Naruto wide-eyed and said, I see your point. You do understand that Naruto will not be allowed to leave the village, and I will make surprise inspections to ensure his is okay during the times you're babysitting. Vixen said, yeah. That's no problem. The third asked, so how long do you think it will take for your workers to have your place ready? Vixen said, well, since it's Monday, the team will be done by Sunday. The third blinked and asked, how is your team going to be able to do that? Vixen said, my employer has some great contractors who work extremely fast and are only waiting for my order to come into the village and begin. The third sighed and said, well, then I will take Naruto and you can go ahead and get to work with what needs to be done. Vixen handed Naruto to the third and said, have a good day and see you soon, Naruto-kun, as she turned and left the office. The third said, Inu, follow her and make sure she is not an assassin. An ABNU with a dog mask appeared back in the room with a towel over his head, trying to dry it, and bowed before leaving. Naruto cried and the third walked over and checked Naruto, who suddenly shit all over the third's hand when he checked him. The third looked at Naruto and said, you hate me, don't you, Naruto? Naruto smiled and giggled as the third sighed before getting to work cleaning the mess in Naruto. Vixen was walking through the village when she saw two men who were drunk, and one said, hey pretty lady. How about coming over here and showing us a good time? Vixen smirked and said, sorry, your dicks are too small for my taste. As she walked past the ally they were standing against. One man went to grab her from behind when she phased out of view and appeared behind him and slammed him into a wall with his hand pulled up so he was unable to move, and she said, it's people like you who give Konoha a bad name. I wonder why the Yondaime chose to save this village full of assholes. Another man pulled out a kunai and charged Vixen, who used replacement with the man she was holding, causing his friend to stab him, and she turned and punched him in the face and said, you know, I wonder how long the Anbu who is following me is going to let you keep attacking before getting involved, seeing as how one man's already dead because he was looking for a good time. Just then an Anbu appeared and said, you are under arrest for assault. Grabbing the man who Vixen punched and tied him up when two other Anbu appeared and took him away. The Anbu in the dog mask turned and said, you surprised me with you skills. Are you a ninja? Vixen said, no. Mr. Kaza made sure all who work for him could handle themselves in a fight. He has us trained for 1 year before ever taking a job that would put us in danger. He feels that us being able to protect ourselves so we can work longer for him would be worth more than just hiring a bunch of idiots who would run if attacked. Why else do you think I could walk around with a check for 750,000 that can be used at any major bank in the world, only needing the person it's for name wrote on it? It also helps I am his major business manager and part-time bodyguard should there come a time where he has to carry something worth more than money. So tell me, why were you following me since I left the Hokage office? The Anbu said, I was asked to make sure you made it home safely. Vixen said, nice try, Kakashi. It's obvious the Hokage wanted to make sure I'm not some kind of assassin sent to kill the child. If I was, I could have killed him there in the office at any time, but I did not. The Anbu asked, how do you know me? Vixen sighed and said, I knew Minato as a passing acquaintance. My employer had some kind of agreement with him that I do not know of. I was told who could be trusted, and I was told you would be in a dog mask. You along with a person named Guy along with Jiraiya and the Hokage are all people I was told I could trust, but I am not to do more than be an occasional helper and guard for him, as it would interfere with whatever the agreement was. I am also aware of the fact Naruto is Minato's son. Kakashi was wide-eyed and asked, "How do you know this?" Vixen reached into her pocket and pulled out a scroll and said, "Here's my official orders for my time in Konoha." Kakashi took the scroll and read. Vixen, you are to take the scroll labeled Konoha and proceed with the deal described in it. You are then to rebuild that section of Konoha to make it the best area in Konoha and then have our SEALs team set up security seals on it so only those who are respectable of the Yondaime's wishes may live there. You are also to make a place for Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze to have as a home when he gets older. I have no doubt in my mind the child will be put in the orphanage and then kicked out to live on the streets. When that happens, he is to receive his new home, which will make it where only those he trusts will be able to get to him and provide him with a safe place to sleep and live. You are to only trust Hitaki Kakashi, student of the Yondaime who is now an Anbu who wears a dog mask, Jiraiya, Minato Sensei, Guy, Kakashi longtime rival and closest living friend, and the Hokage himself. Make sure the council gets no control of these lands because if they do they will force Naruto onto the street or try and bypass the security so they can assassinate him. When Naruto gets old enough I will personally come and deliver what his father asked of me and to complete my orders he requested. You are to remain in Konoha and be my eyes and ears as well as my official representative. If you wish you may try and take care of him from time to make sure he has food and a safe place to sleep but not as a permanent thing. Only like a babysitter. If you see something that is life-threatening to Naruto you are allowed to interfere, but if it is something that will not kill him or seriously hurt him physically you are not to do anything. Naruto will have to decide as he grows up what he wishes to do and he will either decide to follow his father in protecting Konoha or he will start a life away from a place that scorns him. It will be his choice but he must experience life there to decide which he will follow. None K's. Kakashi finished reading it before handing it back to her and said, I see, so that's what the whole business deal is about. A place for Naruto to live in. Vixen said. Yes, if things go like my employer thinks it will the third will have no choice but to declare Naruto an adult and have him take care of himself and most likely the people of Konoha won't let him have a decent or safe place to live. With the security seals I am ordered to put on the buildings Naruto will not have to worry about that. Kakashi asked. Why did you not tell the Hokage? Vixen said. Simple. Should I tell the Hokage the truth he would be even more suspicious than he is now and then probably outright refuse what my employer has asked me to do or have me leave Konoha. He will also have to tell the council what is going on and that could make it where word would leak out about Naruto's true heritage from someone like Danzo who has publicly said Naruto should be turned into a weapon. If Minato was still alive he would kill the man. Kakashi sighed and said. You know I will have to tell the Hokage now. Vixen sighed and said, I know but you can choose what to tell him. Now if you will excuse me I have work to do. And she turned and left. Kakashi looked at the sky and then used Leaf Shunshin to leave and appear in the Hokage office and the third asked, so tell me Kakashi, what is it she's here for? Kakashi glanced around and said, her employer actually is buying these lands and helping this village as a way to honor sensei. When Naruto gets older he will have a safe place to live should the villagers refuse to wise up. The reason the council not allowed is so that way they can't force Naruto not to live there. The third said, I see. Very well, I will allow her some visitation rights over Naruto as a test but you are to watch from a distance at those times and ensure his safety. Kakashi nods and looks at the sleeping Naruto who smiles and rolls over away from the others and thought, phase 1 complete. 5 years later. Naruto had been in the orphanage and have had many attacks and now lived on the streets. The third Hokage sighed as he walked up to Naruto and said, Hello Naruto, how are you today? Naruto looked up and said, Tired old man. They kicked me out again and I have had to sleep in the woods so people won't try and kill me in my sleep. The third shook his head. Naruto always talked like an adult, as all his innocence was already lost to the hatred of the village. It was only thanks to a few that Naruto stayed sane in his opinion. He said, well, how would you like a chance to live in your own apartment? Naruto asked, what's the catch old man? Even I know that you won't be able to make someone like me because of furball. The third blinked and asked, how do you know about that? Naruto slapped his forehead and asked, what do you think I am, an idiot? I have had people yelling at me, calling me demon, beating me, calling me a fox, have a huge seal on my stomach that appears and disappears and was born the same day Kyuubi attacked. It don't take much to figure out that either I am the Kyuubi or the fox is sealed in me. A monk's voice said, it's the latter one, Naruto. The fox was sealed in you by your father. The third looked up and asked, who are you? Naruto said, my father. The man who had black hair and red eyes and stood about 5 feet 10 said, forgive me for being rude, Hokage-sama, but I have just recently arrived and sent my personal assistant Vixen on another matter. As far as you are concerned, I am Mr. Nun Case, however that is a fake name as the real Nun Case is right beside you. Mr. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. My real name is Shinro. The third looked at the man and Naruto asked, what do you mean by Namikaze? Shinro reached into his pocket and pulled out a scroll and said, this was one of your father's last request of me. I was one of his top spies during the war, and since all traces of me in Konoha had been destroyed, I was someone who could work behind the scenes. As he handed the scroll to the third. The third opened it and started to read. Dear Hokage-sama, since I don't know if the Sandaime is the Hokage at this time or if he has retired, I will address you as such. I am writing this letter to inform you that the man here is one of my most trusted friends. Not even my sensei Jiraiya knows of his existence. At one time he was a spy directly under the Tsuchikage. When I received word of the Kyuubi attack, I sent a messenger bird to him with instructions on what to do with a secret account of money for him. By now Naruto should be financially able to survive on his own, and since my friend here would not appear before as he had received word that Naruto was to be named as an adult and the council can't interfere in it. The truth of who I am and what I must do is to be revealed to Naruto if he has not already figured it out. Signed. Minato Namikaze. Yondaime Hokage of Konoha. Yon. The third sighed and said, I see, and since it has the official seal of the Yondaime on it, I have no choice in the matter. I am however curious as to how you found out what I had only decided that a few hours ago, as he looked at the man. Shinro smiled and said, the moment that decision was told, the council had already spread word to the villagers. Some are already planning on a nice party for him, since technically the ABNU guards who are supposed to watch him can't be ordered to anymore unless he becomes a threat to the village. Danzo was more than helpful in that matter. Vixen notified me when she heard about it, and since I was only a few miles away, I came immediately, since I know the council may try and say that you are making up the fact Naruto actually owns all those buildings. The third looked at Naruto and said, Naruto, your father was Minato Namikaze, the Yondaime Hokage, and he could not kill the Kyuubi, so instead he sealed it into you, and he could not ask someone else to do what he himself wouldn't. Your mother was Kushina Uzumaki and died during labor. Naruto looked down and said, so I have no family and my father is the reason I'm hated. The third sighed and bent down to Naruto and said, Naruto, your father and mother both wanted to be there for you, but they had no choice. You have to accept this. Naruto looked down and asked, why was I not told before? The third said, because I passed a law saying that no one was to tell anyone who did not know, but some broke the law anyways and told. Naruto said, so they knew who my parents were and still treat me like the Kyuubi and even broke the law, and here I am treated as a criminal. The third said nothing. Naruto said while looking down, hey, Shinro, was it? Where are you from? Shinro said, I travel all over. Why? Looking at Naruto. Naruto looked up at him and said, I want to leave Konoha for a while. The third said, Naruto, you can't do that. Naruto looked at him and said, I'm an adult by law of Konoha, correct? The third winced and said, yes. Naruto said, I am not now or have ever been a ninja of this village, correct? The third knew Naruto was right and nodded, and Naruto said, in that case, since I am not a ninja of this village nor a child in the care of this village or a criminal, I cannot be held here like a prisoner having to live through all their hatred. I'm gone. And started to walk away. The third said, Naruto, wait. Don't do this, I won't allow it. Naruto stopped and said, old man, either I leave with your permission or I will sneak away. Either way, I am leaving. I will return before my class graduates from the academy, but I need some time to be happy. And walked toward Shinro, who placed his hand on Naruto. The third sighed and asked, can I at least get someone I know to go with you? Naruto said, no. How many of my bodyguards do you know that you thought were safe and wound up trying to kill me? I will trust Shinro here unless he tries something, and then I will leave his care. The third looked down, unable to believe it's come to this, and asked, Will you protect him, Shinro? Shinro said, yes. I will also teach him what I know. The third nodded and said, Naruto, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Naruto walked over and hugged the third and said, old man, I don't blame you. If you want to make it up to me, do 3 things for me. 1. The first day of every academy year, I want you to meet all the kids away from their parents and explain sealing to them, and then explain about sealing a demon. 2nd, I want you to make an announcement 1 year before I return about who I really am and who my parents are. Even if it gets leaked to other villages, it will be okay, but make sure everyone in the village knows who I am and what I contain and why my father did it. The 3rd thing I want you to do is remain Hokage until I return and protect the village and its people, including your new grandson. I want you to know when I return and see the man I will become and be proud of me. The third smiled a sad smile and said, I will, Naruto. Naruto smiled and walked back over to Shinro, and Shinro said, don't tell anyone that Naruto owns those buildings, as I will be sending someone to buy more for Naruto to own. Also, Minato asked me to tell you to use Kajbunshians to do your paperwork. It will give you more free time. And then Naruto and him were both gone in a swirl of leaves. The third looked where they were a moment before and let a tear fall down his face. When Naruto and Shinro appeared outside of the village, Naruto sighed and said, that was harder than I thought it would be. Shinro shifted and turned into Kyuubi in her human form, which is a woman about 5 feet 10 with black hair and red eyes, and she wore an outfit like Kurenai wears, except it was all black. Naruto took off his cloths and slowly shifted from the body of a 5 years old to that of him when he was 15. Kyuubi pulled out a scroll and handed it to him, and he unsealed the items in it and started to change cloths into a black pair of shinobi pants with built-in holsters, including a third one, and black shirt with a built-in vest and with scrolls in it already. A white mask that had black eyes and 4 red lines running vertically down the middle, with 1 line going through each eye and the other 2 lines going down the nose. A Highlander sword that had a dragon's head on the hilt was held in a white sheath. He also had a black cloak that had red on the inside. Think Zangetsu and Ichigo's cloaks. Naruto sighs and said, man, it feels good to be out of there for now. I don't know how much longer I could handle acting as a kid. I'm glad I got the ability to shape-shift. Kyuubi said, add to the fact that you are now as strong as you were when you first became a genin, thanks to the gravity seals as well as your training, though all you could do was up your seals and work on speed and endurance, and since you only have 1 chakra now, you control is way better. It was a small price to pay for my freedom from the seal, but giving you 3/4 of my original chakra was worth it, dear. Now I have to train also, but at least this way you will be the stronger and rightful king of demons. Naruto smirked and said, I still can't believe that nobody ever found them after the gravity seals the second time you babysit me. At least with the clone of me you made and allowed me to get something else to eat besides milk and baby food. Shiver, now I know why I hate milk so much. Kyuubi stretched and said, at least now I can be in my normal body. Naruto asked, so what has been going on, Angel? Kyuubi smiled at the name Naruto had chosen for her and said, well, Naruto-kun, as you already know, I have been buying parts of the village and investing in businesses that are having trouble that we know will become big in the next few years. I used the money from the gold I sold after arriving that I kept in my den and have been getting everything ready. I also wrote those books you asked me to, so that will get us extra income and also get your name out there, Mr. Nuncase. As she walked over and kissed him. After a few kisses, Naruto pulled back and said, yeah, who would have ever thought I would start following Ero Sanin lead and publish a porn book, which is the Hermit's Diary. I also got a few new jutsu walking around the village. That bloodline you created for me that allows me to use the Hyuga and Uchiha bloodline without the noticeable side effect telling people it's active help. Angel, as she was now called, smiled and said, yes, the ability to see 360 degrees and also copy any jutsu and dispel all genjutsu, including the ones of the Sharingan, no matter what level, makes a great wedding present. Well, what do we do now? Naruto eyes glossed over as he pulled his mask over his face and said, Gato won't make an appearance in Wave for 4 years and won't try and kill Inari's dad until a year after that. That will be the catalyst. Zabuza will make an attempt to kill the Mizukage in 2 years, at which time he will pick up Haku. Itachi will kill the Uchiha clan between the next 1 to 3 years. I know it happened while we were in the academy early program, but I don't remember when. Between now and then I need to get stronger and make a name for myself. One that will strike fear into the hearts of my enemies and give hope to those who have none. Angel smiled and said, I agree Naruto-kun, and I know the perfect place to start. Let's make art a bang. Naruto smiled and said, Deidara in Iowa. He won't become a missing nin for another year if I remember correctly, so if I bust my ass for 1 year I can take him out. Take out Akatsuki before they have a chance to mess the world up. Let's head to your den and train there for the next year. Together both start heading off to begin hell on earth for training. The likes of which would make Lee and Guy run in fear. Deidara smirked as he was sitting in a tree thinking of what he has been up to. 1 month ago he blew up the Tsuchikage tower and nearly killed the Tsuchikage. After that he had been doing odd jobs of terrorism, taking out anything that needed to be blown up. A figure could be seen walking in the field below him with a fox on his shoulder, and the figure said, Deidara, former ninja of Iowa. I have come for your head. Deidara laughed and said, and who do you think you are to make such a threat to me? As he reached his hand into his pouch and had his hands start eating clay. The figure said, I am called many things, but you can call me the Arankar Cage. To remove shadow. Deidara laughed and said, that is funny, but let me show you why my art is more than you will ever live to talk about. As he pulled out his hand and molded some clay into the shape of a bird. Notice until I say otherwise, ARRACNAR Cage will just be called Cage. Cage put his hands together and 5 copies of him appeared and they hanged into birds before Cage started doing hand signs, and a strong wind picked the birds up and they started to fly. Cage had to jump away as one of the clay birds flew toward him and exploded. When the smoke cleared, Deidara could not see the man there, but he still felt his chakra. Suddenly a bird chirping could be heard and he turned his head and saw one of the hanged birds fly beside him and explode, sending him toward the ground. As he fell he righted himself, but another bird came and exploded into his back, blowing him into a tree. He had to use chakra to stick to the tree as he looked around. He pulled out some more clay and soon made a 20-foot long snake that he stood on the head of. Cage appeared ahead of him and the snake charged to bite Cage, who started doing hand signs before saying, Fuden. Taihan Kameidachi Jutsu. And blades of wind charged at the snake, causing Deidara to jump off as the snake exploded, destroying most of the clearing. Deidara looked around and said, art is A. He was caught off guard as another explosion hit behind him as another of the kamikaze birds blew up in his face. He landed hard on the ground and looked around and saw the other 2 birds flying in circles above his head when a pair of hands grabbed his ankles, pulling him into the ground. A figure jumped out of the ground and Deidara said, you think you got me? I don't think so. And he exploded, covering the entire field to be covered in smoke and dirt. Suddenly a giant clay bird could be seen flying out of the smoke at incredible speed. Deidara looked back and said, yeah, any artist knows when to take his art elsewhere. As he smirked and turned back to look in front of him, only to go wide-eyed as in front of him is a huge ass F5 tornado spinning, blocking his path. He pulls up on the bird and blinks as the tornado distorts and disappears, and he realizes he was caught in a genjutsu. Biting his lip, dispelling it, he looks around and reaches his hands into his pouches and pulls out some clay, but as he hears a chirp he looks down, and in both of his hands were not his clay but the 2 birds that had been circling him earlier. He got wide-eyed and said, art is A. Boom. Both birds explode, causing the bird that Deidara's on to also explode, and he flies toward the ground at an incredible speed. He would have made his landing softer if he could have, but both of his arms had been blown off in that explosion, as had his legs below the knees. As he finally came to a hard stop, he blinked and saw the fox that was on the mon's shoulder earlier running at him with a double-sided blade that had a wood handle in the middle that held it together and allowed the fox to carry it without getting hurt. He closed his eyes and the fox sliced cleanly through his neck, ending his life. Cage walked out of the woods and said, nice work, Angel, on the genjutsu. It gave my exploding clones a chance to get into his weapons pouch. As he picked up the head and sealed it into a scroll. The fox shifted from a normal-looking fox into her human form, and she smirked and sealed the weapon into her arm and said, yeah. Using your wind affinity with your shape-shifting abilities made your clones able to fly and get close enough to get him where we could kill him. Cage sighed and said, so who is next? Sasori is off the charts and Kisame and Itachi both don't leave their villages for another few months. Angel thought and said, I say after we get the bounty on his head we go after that bitch Aoi. You know, the one who stole the Raijin. That would be a great weapon for you. Cage sighed and said, he's in rain. If we head there we have to avoid pain. I'm good right now, low Junin at best, but I am not ready for pain. Not yet. Angel said. Don't forget Kit. Pain doesn't take over Rain for another 3 years. He is still in hiding. Cage nods and said, right, well, let's go to the nearest bounty station. I think it's about 3 days travel south of here. Angel changed back into a fox and jumped on his shoulder, and Naruto took off running through the trees. 3 days later, Cage walked into the office of a border town and said, I'm here to collect a bounty. The man, without looking up, said, okay, you came to the right place. Who are you here to collect on? As he was writing into a ledger. Cage said, Deidara of Iowa. The man dropped his pen and asked, who are you collecting on? Cage pulled out a scroll and unsealed a head and said, Deidara of Iowa. The man was wide-eyed and said, I see, S rank missing nin Deidara of Iowa. Bounty 2 million is the price on his head. Tell me your name. Cage smiled and said, I go by many names, but you can call me Arankar Cage. The man nods and writes it down before writing a check and handed it to Cage and said, well, Mr. Cage. What village are you from? Cage said behind his mask, none and all, as he took the check and turned as he left the room. The man behind the counter wrote down, Arankar Cage, age, weight, height estimated at 6 feet, eyes, hair, home village, skills, bloodline, dressed in all black and has a white mask that had black eyes that is impossible to see through, and 4 red lines running vertically down the middle with 1 line going through each eye and the other 2 lines going down the nose. Carries a sword and is in the company of a fox. Killed S rank missing nin Deidara of Iowa. He sighs and said, why does everyone always have to be secretive? Cage, after getting his money, quickly resupplied and left town, but not before mailing out the 2nd volume of the Hermit's Diary to his editor, who just happens to be the same editor for Ika Ika Paradise. About 2 weeks later, Cage was sitting in a border town on of Iowa in rain when he tensed. Across from him was someone he did not want to see. Orochimaru was sitting in a corner booth and beside him was Sasori. Cage curses his luck and taps the fox on his shoulder, who jumps off as he said, K's, making the fox look where Naruto is and go wide-eyed and nods. Just then Aoi walks in and Cage smirks as an idea hits him, and he starts doing one-hand signs under the table and smiles as he hears someone come in the door dressed in all white, and he screams, Yo, Aoi, making everyone in the bar look at him, including the 2 Akatsuki members. Several people, knowing what is about to happen, gets up and leaves not to get involved in the fight. Cage gets up and the fox jumps on his shoulder and he walks out, leaving the scene behind, and Aoi asked the man dressed all in white, who are you and why did you want my attention? As he narrows his eyes and reaches for a kunai. Cage smirks behind his mask as he jumps up on the building and he hears the man in white say, my name is Death and I am here for the bounty on your head. Orochimaru narrowed his eyes and whispered, watch him. To Sasori. Sasori nods and Cage smirks behind his mask, getting the info from his clone who heard it before it dodges a kunai thrown by Aoi, who jumps out the doors trying to get room to fight. Cage said, Angel dear, would you be so kind as to take out his legs? The fox jumps off of his shoulder and bites it paw, unsealing the weapon she used against Deidara pops out and she grabs it between her teeth and runs after Aoi. Aoi for his part turns and then looks but does not see the man chasing him. He then screams as his leg is cut off from behind. Back in the bar a few moments later. The man in white turns and nobody can tell anything about him because all his cloths are white and he wears a blank white mask, and the cloak he had a white hood covering his hair, and said over his shoulder, tell me Orochimaru. Are you still interested in getting revenge against your former sensei? Orochimaru narrowed his eyes even more and asked, who are you? The man said, a puppet of the Shinigami. As a scream could be heard and he pulls out a 3-prong kunai and throws it out the window, leaving in a yellow flash, making Orochimaru piss himself. Sasori asked, was that the Hiraishin no Jutsu? Orochimaru is already out the door, not bothering to look at his partner, and looks where the form of Aoi could be seen laying on the ground with his head gone, as were one of his legs that lay a few feet away and his body bleeding all over the ground. The man in white is standing there looking at the body. Orochimaru walks over and said, who the hell are you? The man looks up and said, like I told you, Orochimaru. I am nothing more than a puppet of the Shinigami. It's the fate of those who sell their souls to him, though I do wonder who killed this fool. As he reaches up and removes his mask, making Orochimaru eyes go wide, as there is the face of Minato Namikaze. Orochimaru asked, "What the hell is going on? You're dead." Kage said, "Yes, I am. Shinigami gave me a deal. Freedom from his belly in exchange for collecting the souls of those he has placed bounties on. I have to collect 10,000 souls. Aoi here is one such, however, someone else collected the bounty the humans placed on him, meaning I don't get credit for it. He was supposed to have died in the fire when he nearly killed Ibiki, but now I was sent for him. I already received a report that in the near future I will be seeing you again along with most of Akatsuki, since you're all stupid enough to try and use the demons. Death knows everything. Good luck." As he slowly started to fade away, leaving Orochimaru to look at the spot where he was a moment ago, as was Sasori, who had came out to see what was going on. Neither man noticed the figure sitting on the roof of the building they had exited with the scroll containing the head of Aoi, or him pocketing a kunai in the region. The fox that was on his shoulders closed its eyes and said, "Fools." Neither of them realized they were looking at a kitsune illusion. Kage smirked and said, "Good job, dear. Someday you will have to teach me how to do them." As he jumps off the roof, getting the hell away from the two Akatsuki members. Orochimaru narrows his eyes and thinks, perhaps now is a good time to leave these fools. I'm done. I've learned the immortality jutsu from Madara. Sasori said. Hey, what the hell was that? Orochimaru said. I don't know. Sasori said. Well, let's get out of here and inform the others what we saw. Pain said we were about to get a new member in few months. Some Uchiha prodigy he has contacted recently. Orochimaru smirks and said, yes, let's go see what is going on. I'd like to know what is happening with the Uchihas. And thinks, this will be a perfect chance for me to get a new body with the Sharingan. Kage traveled back to the town he was at a few weeks earlier and saw the same man and said, hey man, I got another bounty to collect. The man looked up and thought a moment before flipping through a book and said, oh, I remember, you know. Arankar Kage. So who is it this time? Kage unsealed the scroll and the man said, I see a rank missing Nin Aoi Rokusho of Konoha, now a Junin of Rain. You do realize that you will be put in the books for killing him, right? Kage said, yes, but as you said, he already had a bounty on him from Konoha. You know I never got your name. The man said, my name is Titus. Do you know what happened to the Raijin sword he stole? Kage pulled it out and said, I have it and will only return it to Tsunade herself, being the only living relative of the Nadaime. Titus nods and said, right, well here's your check for the head of Aoi. Good luck. And Kage left. Titus sighed and looked at what he wrote last time and wrote. Arankar Kage. Age. Weight. Height estimated at 6 feet. Eyes. Hair. Home village. Skills. Bloodline. Dressed in all black and has a white mask that had black eyes that is impossible to see through, and 4 red lines running vertically down the middle with 1 line going through each eye and the other 2 lines going down the nose. Carries a sword and is in the company of a fox. Also carries the Raijin, though claims he will return it to Tsunade herself. Killed. S rank missing Nin Deidara of Iwa. A- rank missing Nin Aoi Rokusho of Konoha, Junin of Rain. Kage was walking down the street when he sees someone from his past, or rather his future. Nader Ruga. Kage said as he took a seat and watched the man eat. Angel, what do you think we should do next? Angel said, well, until we go to the land of water, nothing I know of. Why? Kage said, I think we should go to Spring Country. Angel blinked and said, but Spring Country does not. I see. As she notices Nader sitting there. Kage said, I need you to get to Konoha as fast as possible and have an S-rank mission requested. Go as Vixen. I want Kakashi and Guy on this mission. I want them to track down Yukie and give them all info on Yukie, as well as the fact she won't go willingly, and tell them it is at request of me, but Arankar Kage will be joining the mission at some point, who is helping in assassinating Dotu Kazuhana and restoring Yukie as the rightful heir to the land of snow. I'm going to go on ahead. Angel said. You do realize you will be on Konoha radar after this. Kage nods and Angel jumps off his shoulder and takes off toward Konoha. Kage gets up and walks over to where Nader was sitting and said, well, this is a surprise. Meeting someone from the land of snow all the way out here on the border of Iwa country. Taking the seat next to him and grabbing a bottle of sake from the bartender. Nader looks at him and said, I don't know what you're talking about. As he starts to get up. Kage said, really? So you don't want information of your lost princess? making Nadir stop and turn to look at Cage, who handed him another bottle of sake and motioned for him to take a seat. Nadir sits down and said, I don't know what you're talking about, but I will see if I can remember what it is if you start talking. Cage smirked behind his mask and said, here's the deal. I know all about the crystal you need, as well as the fact that Dotu is the ruler of Snow Country. I know that Yukie has the crystal, but you don't know where she is. I am willing to sell this info for 5 things. Nadir narrows his eyes and asked, and those 5 things would be? Cage said, simple. I want 10,000. I want a list of 20 ice jutsu all above D rank. I want one of the famous chakra armors for myself that I have heard so much about, as well as the blueprints to repair the armor if it is ever damaged. I want free travel papers to come and go into the land of snow in case I ever have a bounty there I want to collect, and I want this deal agreed to by Dotu himself, who I will give the info to once I see that he has all that I have asked for. In exchange, I will give the name Yukie is hiding under, as well as her current location and how to find her. If he agrees, in this scroll is a special seal that will summon me to him shortly. Just break the seal on the outside and open it. If I do not hear from him in 1 month, the seal inside will dissolve and will no longer work, and I won't sell my info to him, and you can spend the next 10 or 20 years trying to find her. You should know this. If you try and double cross me, you have better pray it works, because I only hunt down A and S rank nins and I am very good at it. As he hands the scroll to Nadir and left. Nadir looks at it and quickly forgets his regular mission. Dotu would pay high dollar for this info, and you never want to cross him. Cage smirked as he watched Nadir leave and takes off towards Snow Country at a slower pace. Angel had traveled for about a week when she neared Konoha and changed back into her human form and took off into the trees. When she arrives at the gates, the guards said, stop. State your name and reason for coming to Konoha. Angel said, my name is Vixen and I have come to request an S-rank mission from your village, and I wish to speak with the Hokage. Both men nod and an ABNU appeared and escorted her to the Hokage tower. When she arrived, the third looked up and blinked and said, hello again, Vixen. I have not seen you since before Naruto left. To what do I owe the pleasure of your visit? Vixen said, it's good to see you again. I have been sent to request an S-rank mission from my employer. The third blinked and said, really? What has Shinro been up to and how is Naruto? Vixen smiled and said, I'm sorry to say that Shinro passed away a few months ago, but Naruto-sama has taken over all dealings and is my new employer. It is him who requested this mission. The third nodded and said, so what is the mission? Vixen said, the mission is simple. As I have been informed, you already know about the coup d'etat of Snow Country a few years back. Naruto-sama has come into contact with a group of the older royal guard and they have asked for his help. He has agreed and is sending one of his best men named Cage to go into Snow Country and assassinate the leader Dotu. The mission I am here to request is that Kakashi and Guy, along with whomever you feel should be on this mission, track down Princess Yukie, who is actually the actress who plays the lead in the Unlucky Princess movies. Her manager is actually one of the royal guards and has been keeping her safe, though she does not know it. She possesses the future of Snow Country in the crystal around her neck. That crystal is the key to start a generator that will melt all the snow in Snow Country, allowing the spring that was promised to its people to actually happen. The team you send need to get her to go back to Snow, even against her will, to take over. The assassination may be over before they arrive, but in case it's not, they are to protect Yukie until they meet up with Cage and he informs them that the mission is a failure or a success. Kakashi was requested since he's been there before, and Guy is requested as he is strong enough to fight against the snow armor. The third said, it seems Naruto has taken a very hard task to himself. How is he doing and when will he be returning? Vixen said, Naruto is doing great and is actually very strong now. You will know what I mean when you see him, and as for when he is to return, it will be when he promised before his age group graduates. Now here is a scroll with the check for an A- rank bounty. Konoha is to pay for a missing nin that Cage just recently captured as payment. Handing the check to the third, who looked at it and got wide-eyed. He asked, what of the Raijin? Vixen said, it is in safe hands, and Naruto-sama said that it will be returned to Tsunade herself, being the rightful heir to it. The third nods and said, well, this is a good portion of the cost of an S-rank mission, but not enough. Vixen pulled out a checkbook and said, how much more do you need? Looking at him. The third said, usually another 25,000. Vixen wrote a check for 40,000 and said, in case the mission is harder than it should be. I must be off now, but this mission is time sensitive, so please hurry with it and don't inform anyone that Naruto requested it. Say the employer is Cage. As she turns and leaves the office. She soon leaves the village, and after about an hour of traveling in the woods she stops before setting up camp to rest before going to where Naruto was the next day. Kakashi appeared in the Hokage office and was greeted by the shouts of guys saying, "Ah, my eternal rival, what new hip attitude are you going to use today?" The third said, "Now that Kakashi has arrived, I can give you the information for the mission. It's an S-rank mission. All details are in that scroll. Kakashi, you are in charge of the team from Konoha." As he hands the scroll over, Kakashi grabs it and reads, Mission rank S. Mission is to get Yukie Fujikaze, the lead actress for the Unlucky Princess movies, who is actually Princess Koyuki Kazuhana, daughter of the late ruler of Snow Country and the rightful heir to the throne. She is to be taken to Snow, even by force, so she can take over. Her manager is one of the former king's loyal guard and has been protecting Yukie, so you might be able to get him to help. An Arankar Cage, who you will meet on the mission, who is assassinating Dotu Kazuhana, requested the mission. Your mission is to protect the princess and ensure the protection of the crystal she wears. That crystal is the key to saving Snow Country. You are to protect Yukie until the assassination is over, or Arankar tells you the mission is a failure. Team: Kakashi, Guy, Asuma, Ibiki. Kakashi looked up and asked, "Why is Ibiki going?" Ibiki said, "I want to meet the man that killed Aoi." Kakashi was wide-eyed a moment and said, "I see. Is there any other information on this Arankar guy?" Ibiki pulled out a bingo book and said, "All the info I have is from the new bingo book. Apparently he has taken out the S-rank missing nin Deidara of Iwa and Aoi." Kakashi nods and asked, "Do we have any leads on where Yukie is?" The third said, "As a matter of fact, the Fire Lord recently sent a mission requesting a simple bodyguard for the movie while they shoot in the northern part of the Fire Country near Kanku City." Kakashi nods and said, "Okay, if we are going to Snow Country, I should warn you all that Snow Ninja have a special armor that make them stronger than normal people. Prepare for winter weather." As he left, followed by the others. The third said, "Ibiki, before you leave, I have another mission for you." Ibiki blinked and said, "What is it, Hokage-sama?" The third looked around and said, "I did not tell the others, but the real person who ordered this mission was Naruto Uzumaki. Arankar Cage works for him. Don't ask me how, because I can't say, but I want you to see if you can find out any information on Naruto for me." Ibiki nods and leaves. 3 days later, Kakashi was smiling at the look on Yukie's face as she comes out of the cabin and notices they are on a boat heading out to sea. She screams, "What the hell's going on?" Asama Sandayu said, "I'm sorry, Princess Koyuki, but when these men came and told me what their mission was, I had to act, so I allowed them to put a sleeping pill in your drink. It was for the good of Snow Country." Yukie turned and looked at him and said, "What the hell are you talking about?" A voice from above them all said, "She's louder than I thought, Cage," making everyone look up and see a man standing on the flagpole above the sails of the ship. Cage looked down and said, "I'm glad to see the Hokage did as I asked." As he jumped down and everyone in the group looked at him. Kakashi asked, "Who are you?" Cage turned and said, "It's a pleasure to meet you, Kakashi. I'm Arankar Cage. I was the one who paid for the mission." Yukie asked, "Will someone please tell me what the hell's going on?" Cage turned and the fox on his shoulder said, "Is she always this impatient? It reminds me of a pink-haired bitch." Cage snickered and said, Now, Angel. Don't be like that. I mean, she did watch her family home be destroyed by her uncle and then was forced to flee in a snow sled as Kakashi here took her away after her uncle killed her father. You can't blame her." Kakashi narrowed his eyes and asked, "How do you know about that?" As he reached for a kunai. Cage said, "Simple. A ninja by the name of Nader Ruga talked about it when I got him drunk before I set him up so I can assassinate Dotu." Ibiki asked, "What do you mean set up, and how can that fox talk?" The fox laughed and said, "I'm not really a fox. My family has a bloodline that allows us to shapeshift, and since I am legally bound to Cage here as his concubine, I prefer this form." Cage smiled behind his mask and said, What I mean Ibiki is that I gave him a deal that told him I would sell him all information on the location of the princess here as well as the crystal. In return I want 20 ice jutsu, 10,000, free access to travel in snow country and one of their snow armors as well as the blueprints for it so I can repair it. The last thing I asked was that the deal had to be agreed on by Dodu himself and he has to break a seal on a summoning scroll that will summon me to him. When that happens I will appear and before he has a chance to think he will be dead. Yukie said. But why are you doing this? Kage looked at her and asked, do you know what that crystal actually is? I bet your bodyguard Sandayu here doesn't even know because if he did he would have taken it and used it already. Sandayu asked, what are you talking about? That crystal is a national treasure. Kage said. Please. It is actually the key to a massive generator that Yukie's father spent nearly the entire budget of snow on that when activated will melt all the snow in snow country and finally bring the spring that you have all wanted. Well, speak of the devil, angel. Party time. Kakashi, take the group and head for the castle. See ya. As the fox jumps on his shoulders and he leaves shocking everyone in a yellow flash. Kakashi fell on his butt and said, it can't be. Ibiki asked, was that what I think it was? Asuma dropped his cig and said, Hiraishin. In the royal castle Dodu looked at the scroll he opened a few moments ago and said, so when will this man get here? A yellow flash appeared and Kage appeared and said, so do you agree with my proposal? Dodu said, why should I now that you walked into my trap? If you want to live you have better tell me what I want. As the walls all fell away showing around 75 men. Kage smirked behind his mask and said, very well. And he put his hands in front of him like he's going to surrender before throwing them together in a seal and then yelled, mass shadow clone jutsu. And suddenly the entire room was covered in copies of Kage and all of them started forming chakra in both their hands and formed Rasengans. Kage said, now prepare to die. As he charged Dodu who had jumped back and his men charged into battle. Angel looked and said, the bitch is mine. As she jumps off after Fubuki. Kage thought, what the hell is up with her and always wanting to take out the woman? As he ducks under a wild punch and send an uppercut to the guy's chin knocking him into the air before he grabbed the mon's feet and started swinging him knocking him into 4 other men before letting go and letting him fly into the wall. He did not have time to praise himself as he had to dodge a kunai as well as a snow wolf but a fireball from Angel who had turned into her human form destroyed it. Kage looked around and saw most of the men had been taken care of but Nadir was escorting Dodu away. Kage said, Angel, finish up here and follow. I'm going after Nadir and Dodu. As he ran after them. Nadir was panting and Dodu said, how could you let this man trick you into this? Nadir said, but sir, you were the one who. He never got to finish as Dodu turned and slammed a kunai into Nadir's head killing him before he ran to where the train was and got on it and started to leave the castle. Kage saw Nadir dead and never bothered to check him as he followed the sound that was coming down the end of the hall and saw the train leaving and he ran and tried to jump onto the caboose but missed as it went down the hill gaining speed. Kage jumped up and looked around when Fuyuguma Mizore punched him in the back as he rode by Kage on his snowboard. Mizore came charging at Kage who reached for the sword on his side and Kage said, Kitsune sword slice. And phased out of view shocking Mizore and then he screamed out in pain as both his arms were left falling off at first the wrist and then the elbows. Mizore lost his balance and hit a snowdrift and flew head first toward the wall when Angel in fox form came running by him with her boomerang knife in her mouth running down the mon's chest, stomach and coming out at his groin. Kage looked at her as she jumped on his shoulder and he picked up the snowboard and said, let's ride. As he jumped on it and started down the hill following the train that had a lead. He started to go through some hand seals and said, Fuden. Tadakimasu no Taka. And suddenly the wind behind him pushed against his back increasing his speed. As he saw the train getting closer in the distance he asked, so what happened back there? Angel said, well, flashback. Angel said, the bitch is mine, and jumped off his shoulder before heading toward Fubuki. As she was running closer she grabbed a kunai someone dropped in her mouth and jumped at a man who had his back to her before she stabbed the kunai into his spine making him fall to the ground paralyzed. Fubuki turned and saw the man on the ground and started to do some hand signs and some ice daggers charged at Angel who jumped back and changed into her human form and started doing hand signs and said, Kaden. Kaji Suru Kara no Karaikaji no Jigoku, and she bent over and a fireball shot out of her ass flying right at Fubuki, who was too busy sweat dropping to avoid the fireball. Angel smirked and rolled to the side as an enemy tried to cut her in half, and she started doing more hand signs and saw a snow wolf charging Cage and said, Kaden, Hausenka no Jutsu, and shot out 12 fireballs, with 3 hitting the snow wolf melting it and the other 9 hitting 4 men. Just then she heard Cage yell, Angel, finish up here and follow. I'm going after Nadir and Dotu, and ran off. Angel smirked and said, Cage Bunshin no Jutsu, and suddenly 15 copies of her appeared and joined the clones of Cage and finished taking out the rest who were really weak. She then took off following Cage sent in her fox form. End flashback. Angel said, and that's what happened before I arrived. Cage nods and saw the train was only a few feet ahead of him and slowing down, and he slid the board he was riding to the side of the train, still running along it and passing the cars. The train finally stopped and a man jumped out of the engine and looked back toward the castle and got wide-eyed, and Cage jumped into the air with the board still on his feet, going right for Dotu head, and at the speed it was going with the extra weight from Cage on it snapped Dotu neck. The last thing he saw was a little sign that read, How's my boarding? Cage smirked and closed his eyes a moment and dispelled the clones, getting dizzy, and fell on the ground, sitting there a few minutes. He then stood up and picked up the body of Dotu and tied him to the front of the train and got in the engine compartment, but not before removing his snow armor and sealing it away. An Angel jumped on his shoulder and they took off toward the harbor town. Kakashi and the others were to arrive 25 minutes later. Cage stepped out of the train and saw the group getting off the ship, and he walked over and said, Okay, we can go home now, making everyone look at him. Sandayu said, but what about helping us free the county? Cage pointed to the front of the train and said, already done. Yukie here just has to take over now since they don't have a leader, with me killing Fuyuguma Mizore, Kazuhana Dotu, Ruga Nadir, Kakuyoku Fubuki along with those other 50 or so guy with help from Angel here, as he rubbed the fox behind her ear. Yukie was wide-eyed and said, how did you do that? Cage said, a hero always does what's right. Now you asked me why I was doing this. There are several reasons, but as payment for this I only ask for 2 things. When your country gets back on its feet, you set up a trade alliance with Konoha. The other thing is a trade alliance with another hidden village that I will tell you about once I feel like coming back. Now besides those 2 payments, the reason I did this is the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Konoha Yondaime Hokage knew that well. Now remember what I said about that generator. You know where it's located, at the 7 Colors Glacier. Now if you will excuse me, I have some other things to take care of. Kakashi asked, how do you know the Horizon? Cage asked, what's that? Making everyone sweat drop. He then asked, if you don't mind, which way is mist from here? Asuma pointed toward the left and Cage nods and starts walking away. Ibiki asked, how's Naruto? Stopping Cage. Cage said over his shoulder, he's good Ibiki, though he has changed so much that you would not be able to tell if it was him even if he was standing in front of you. Tell the old man he will be back when he said he would, and you're welcome for Aoi. I know how you felt about him, and your brother is alive and happy right now. And then he took off running across the water, making everyone wide-eyed. Asuma asked, is he stupid or something? Nobody can run across 45 miles of ocean without dying. Kakashi narrowed his eyes and bit his thumb and started going through hand signs and said, summoning jutsu, and a little pug appeared. The pug said, yo Kakashi, what you need? Kakashi said, I need you to smell the area and tell me if you smell anyone you know from Konoha. The pug sniffed the ground and looked up and looked around and said, where's that kid at? Kakashi asked, who? The dog said, Uzumaki, his scent is all over the place here and it's fresh also. Asuma said, you don't mean, looking where Cage had disappeared. Kakashi said, it's possible, but I don't know what to say. If he's learned to tap into that chakra, he could make it all the way to Mist or even the mainland without running out of chakra. Though if it is him, then how did he get so strong and also grow up so much? I did not sense a genjutsu or anything. Ibiki said, perhaps Naruto was just here earlier because a ship did leave before we arrived. The third told me that Naruto was the real person who paid for this mission and that Cage worked for him. Cage could also be meeting someone just out to see a little bit and did not want us to know it. Guy said, whatever the truth is, his flames of youth burn brightly. Kakashi said, all right, We tell the Hokage only what we know and suspect but don't mention it in any reports. If it's not him then we don't want to cause him trouble when he returns. Ibiki asked, what hidden village do you think is the other one? Asuma said, I don't know. Let's get the princess home and get this country going again. Everyone nods though each with questions and no answers. Kage was running along the water when he sees a ship up ahead and runs up to it and jumps on board and said, I need to speak with the captain. Before anyone could say anything. A few minutes later he was standing before the captain who asked, so what is it that you need to speak to me about that you would run halfway across the ocean to get to me? Kage pulled out a scroll and unsealed a bag and said, in this bag is 30,000. Make a detour to Mist without docking, just get to sight of land and I will run the rest of the way and the bag's yours. The captain was wide-eyed and said, you heard the man, set course to Mist. So who are you? As he took a seat holding the money. Kage said, my name is Arachnar Kage. That's all you need to know. As he turned and left the bridge of the ship. Naruto, master of the jutsus. When Kage got to Mist, Angel asked, so why did we come here early? Kage smirked behind his mask and said, the Mist is going to have a massive bloodline riot. Angel narrowed her eyes and asked, what are you talking about? Kage smirked and said, well, since we know that any jutsu my clones copy I get when they dispel, I thought that I could get some Mist jutsu, and what better way than to have a bloodline clan attack the Mist village itself. Angel shook her head and said, you're hopeless. Kage said, true, but it will work. Let's go find a base to operate out of. And he took off looking around. About 3 weeks later Kakashi, Asuma, Ibiki, and Guy were all in the Hokage's office and the third was rubbing his eyes and said, I see, I agree that until we know more we are not to tell anyone that we suspect that this Arachnar Kage guy is Naruto. However, are you positive about the Hiraishin and the Rasengan? Kakashi said, yes. He used the Hiraishin to get ahead of us with enough time to take out the enemy, and from the wounds on most of the men I only know one jutsu that can do that, and that would be the Rasengan. The Hokage nods, writing something down and said, all right Ibiki. I want you to add this to his profile in our bingo book and put him down as a SS class shinobi. If any of our men face him they are to leave him alone. Ibiki nods and takes what was wrote and said, should we put him down as a Konoha nin? The third said, no. If we do that we could be at war because he mentioned another village. For now that along with most of his info is unknown. Everyone nods and leaves the office. The next day the new Konoha bingo book had the following info added to it. Arachnar Kage. SS rank. Age. Weight. Height estimated at 6 feet. Eyes. Hair. Home village. Skills. Hiraishin. Rasengan. Bloodline. Dressed in all black and has a white mask that had black eyes that is impossible to see through, and 4 red lines running vertically down the middle with 1 line going through each eye and the other 2 lines going down the nose. Carries a sword and is in the company of a fox. Also carries the Raijin though claims he will return it to Tsunade herself. Assassinated the daimyo of Snow Country as well as nearly 75 men to restore the rightful ruler to power. Order by Sandaime Hokage of Konoha. All Konoha nins are to leave person alone and avoid confrontation at all cost. Killed. S rank missing nin Junin Deidara of Iwa. A- rank missing nin Chunin Aoi Rokusho of Junin of Rain. B rank snow nin Chunin Nadare Ruga. B rank snow nin Chunin Kakuyoku Fubuki. B rank snow nin Chunin Fuyuguma Mizor. Daimyo of Snow Country Kazuhana Dotu. In Mist Kage was sitting in a cave and said, so let me get this straight. You did what? Looking at Angel. Angel sighed and said, I went and signed you up as a mercenary for hire with the Mizukage. If you were to pop out as a bloodline now you could cause Zabuza not to assassinate the Mizukage and then he won't find Haku and then your plan is screwed. Kage said. And you knocked me out for nearly a month after we found this cave. Angel said. Yes. I know you're too stubborn and hard-headed to back down and hold back, as well as that you would send the wrong message. If people found out who you really are then they would join together and try to take you out and you're not ready yet. Kage sighed and said, fine, but if I get a chance to take out Fish Face I'm, as he took a bite out if the fish Angel cooked. The next day Kage got up and ready and went into the Mizukage tower and the Mizukage said, so you're this Arachnar Kage I have heard about. I hear you're looking for some jobs. Kage said, yes. The Mizukage said, good. I got a job for you. I have received a report of another Bloodline user popping up and I want you to kill both. Here is the address. Handing a piece of paper to Cage. Cage took it and left the tower and said, I think I should go ahead and kill him now. Angel said, no, you can't. If you do that now then you will not be able to get all the nins you want. Cage sighed and walked for about an hour before stopping and said, I can't kill her. Angel looked up and said, damn, this complicates things. As she sees a house that has the address they were looking for with ice spikes sticking out of it. Cage said, can you get her sent? Angel jumps down and starts sniffing and said, got it. Follow me. And took off away from the house. They soon find a small clearing with a little girl crying and Cage sighed and said, Haku. Making the girl flinch and look up. He reached up and took off his mask and shrunk down to his normal size and appearance and said, Haku, I'm not going to hurt you. I want to help you. Would you like to come with me? I will take you away from here and I will make sure you don't starve. Haku said, why? I killed them. Angel walked over and sat down in Haku's lap and said, you did it in self-defense and we care for you. Come and follow Naruto-kun here. Haku looked at Naruto and said, I will follow you Naruto-sama. Naruto said, when I am like this call me Naruto-kun but if I am in my other form call me Cage. Now we need to get out of here before the Mizukage decided to send someone to kill you. Haku gets up and Naruto changes back into Cage and Haku asked, who are you Fox? Angel changed into her human form and said, I am Angel and I am Naruto-kun's first wife and concubine. I mostly go in my fox form and I will explain more later but for now just think of me as his servant. Haku nods and follows Cage and Angel who jumped back on Cage's shoulder. Angel asked, so what are we going to do with her? Cage said, I have a plan but we need to find Ero Sanin. Angel asked, do you want me to find him? Cage said, yeah, find him and get him to meet me at Jopeler Falls. Angel nods and jumps off running into the distance and Haku asked, what is it you wish for me to do Cage-sama? Cage said, for now just follow and if you get tired or hungry let me know. We will be leaving the Mist Country today and you may not ever see it again. A voice said, I couldn't have said it better myself. Making Cage look up and he sees the Mizukage along with Momochi Zabuza, Hoshigaki Kisame, Kurosuke Raiga, and Suigetsu. Cage sighed said, hey Zabuza, Kisame, Raiga, Suigetsu, I got a deal for you. Let me kill the Mizukage here and you four can decide who the next Mizukage is. The Mizukage said, nice try. You honestly think these weakling would turn on me? Cage smirked and did some one-hand seals and said, indeed I do. Sweden. Kurigakure Jutsu, and the entire area was covered in a thick mist. Zabuza chuckled and said, I like this guy. As he pulled his sword of his back. Kisame had pulled his sword off his back and was absorbing the chakra out of the mist when he saw the Mizukage jump toward him with a kunai in his hand. He jumps back into the mist and said, look out. The Mizukage just tried to kill me. Suddenly the mist cleared and everyone could see 20 Mizukages all standing a few feet from each other looking at one another. Suigetsu said, where'd the girl go? Making everyone look around. One of the Mizukage said, Suigetsu. Find her and kill her. He turned and started to leave when Zabuza put his hand on his shoulder and said, don't. That was not the Mizukage. Suigetsu asked, what do you mean? Kisame said, simple, he called you by your name instead of calling you weakling. As he threw a kunai at that one only for it to smirk before grabbing the kunai and throwing it back while doing hand signs and said, Ninpu. Kunai Cage Bunshin no Jutsu, and the one turned to 50 all flying at the group. Zabuza and Kisame both blocked them with their swords and jumped toward the one that used the jutsu and swung. The moment they swung, two puffs of smoke happened. One to the left of them and the other directly in front of their sword strikes. Blood sprayed across the air and the body of the Mizukage was cut into 3 pieces as it fell to the earth. Zabuza and Kisame both looked on in shock and all the Mizukage puffed out of view and Cage said, now don't that feel good? To be rid of the guy who called you weaklings as well as treated you like shit and was running your country into the ground. Suigetsu yelled. You murderer, you killed him. And pulled out a kunai and charged Cage when a woman appeared behind him with a kunai at his neck and she said, settle down and listen to Cage here because he has an offer you all might like. After all the Mist Village will blame you all for this even if you somehow defeat Cage which I doubt. as everyone looked at her. Zabuza narrowed his eyes and asked, "Where did you come from?" Cage chuckled and said, "I told her to meet me at Jokeler Falls. The only time me and her have ever been there, it was an ambush, so she went out of sight to prepare to help if I needed it, though I only used 3 jutsu to trick you when I have over 1,000 in my inventory." Kisame asked, "What's this deal you spoke of?" Cage said, "Simple. I'm planning on starting my own village soon, and I need strong ninja as well as some special cases like bloodlines. That's why I came to Mist in the first place, because I plan to offer every bloodline user in Mist a chance at a new life in a village and country that they won't be feared and treated like shit. Now I know you won't follow me just cause I asked, so how about a challenge? Me versus all 3 of you in a full-out battle, with the only restrictions is that neither Suigetsu, Haku, or Angel here can be involved as fighters, prisoners, or anything other than spectators, just like the Chunin exam finals. If I win, you all 3 follow me. If you win, you get this." Pulling out a scroll and unsealed it, showing 30 bags full of 100 bills. Zabuza whistles and said, "That's a lot of money." Angel and Cage laugh, and Cage said, "That pocket change. I have nearly 400 times that much in bank accounts, with more being added every day, and it's all legal also." Kisame said, "I'm in." Feeling greedy. Zabuza said, "Anything goes besides having those 3 involved." Cage nods and said, "Anything from you or me." Raiga said, "I feel the need for a funeral. Let's do this." Angel sighed and grabs Haku from behind the tree she hid her behind earlier and says, "Begin." Zabuza starts doing hand signs and said, "Sweden. Kurigakur no Jutsu," and the area is covered in mist again. Cage did some hand signs and said, "Fuden. Hakyoke's no Jutsu," and suddenly a cold wind blew through the area, blowing all the mist away and leaving ice on the ground. Raiga went through some hand signs and said, "Raiden. Reigeki no Jutsu," and a bolt of lightning hit the ice traveling along it, and Cage went up in smoke, making everyone look around. A shout from above them said, "Kaden. Ranran Sake Jutsu," and 5 sake bottles fell out of the air toward the ground, only to explode as they got to about 5 feet of the ground, covering the ice in sake that was on fire and making steam. Kisame said, "Sweden. Suakumazeru no Jutsu," and a shark formed and shot out a missile from its mouth toward the trees above them, blowing the barks of the tree away. Laughing could be heard, and Cage said, "Thanks Kisame. Fuden. Shikunetsu Naruto Uzumaki Jutsu," and suddenly the wind picked up to 100 miles an hour in the area they were in, and all the steam, fire, water all mixed together to form a red tornado which pulled anything loose into it, burning and crushing it. Angel had grabbed a hold of Haku and Suigetsu and held them as she held her place with chakra. Kisame asked, "Where is he?" as he was busy fighting from being drawn into the tornado. Suddenly out of the tornado came a shout of, "Kunai Cage no Jutsu," and hundreds of kunais came out of the tornado, going all over the clearing, making everyone jump back but the 3 spectators, because they had somehow been missed. Zabuza asked, "How the hell is he inside that thing?" Suddenly a yellow flash was seen and he was kicked in the back, and Cage said, "It's called the Eye of the Storm," as he flashed again to kick Kisame and then Raiga, making pinballs out of all 3 of them, sending them all around the clearing, and the tornado finally stopped and all 3 could be seen on the ground bleeding and beat up, and Cage appeared in front of them and said, "So, are you going to accept my offer?" Suigetsu said, "No, I will never follow you," and he took off running away. Cage sighed and said, "So what about you 3? Zabuza chuckled and asked, "So who are you really?" That was the Hiraishin you used there at the end, and nobody has ever done a couple of those jutsu that you used on us. Cage said, "The real me you will learn after you pass my test of trust. I proved I can beat you, but I have not earned your trust yet, so until you trust me and I trust you completely, you can just call me by the name I used to make the world know me, Arachnar Cage." Kisame chuckles and said, "Well, that fair, so where are we going now?" Cage looked at Angel and said, "Itachi about to kill the Uchiha clan in Konoha, right?" Angel said, "Sometime soon, but we never knew the right date for it." Cage nods and said, "All right, let's see if we can cut him off before he escapes and either try and get him on our side or eliminate him." Zabuza asked, "What are you talking about?" Angel said, "You can say our spy network is one of the best currently, as well as we know a lot of things before they happen. Now let's head toward Konoha." Everyone got ready, thought the 3 swordsmen were a little slower and followed, and Raiga asked, Why is this Cage guy walking in front of us if he does not trust us? Cage said over his shoulder, because my bloodline allows me to see 360 degrees around me, and if you tried to attack me I could kill you before your sword ever cleared their sheaths. As he kept on walking, Kisame said, so you're a Hyuga? Laughter could be heard and Cage said, no, I am not a Hyuga, and that is only one thing my bloodline can do. I can also copy almost any jutsu like the Uchihas, and I can also do some other stuff, but that's a secret for naught. All I will tell you is that I am the first to have it, and it is called the Kitsunegan. Now let's get out of mist before people find out the Mizukage is dead. About a week later, the group of 5 was about 20 miles from Konoha when Cage held up his hand and everyone stopped, and Cage said, Angel, take the group to the next town and wait. I got something I want to check out. Angel, who is in her fox form, nods and jumps off his shoulder turning into a human, and Zabuza said, I still can't believe we all lost to you as well. Angel said, Cage and I are currently about even, but if he drops his weight seals he could take out all of us without breaking a sweat, as she lead the group. When they were gone, Cage turned and ran through the trees for about 5 minutes and came across a girl about 13 years old, about 5 feet 6, and she had long black hair going down to about middle of her back, and she was crying and she was covered in blood, and he looked around before landing in the field she was in and asked, are you okay, miss? Look at a picture of Uchiha Makoto and make her about 13, and there you have it, except she dressed in a guy's Anbu uniform without the mask. The girl looked up and Cage gasped, as there looking right at him was the Mangekyo Sharingan, and the girl asked, who are you? In a soft voice, Cage said, my name is Arachnar Cage, who might you be, Miss Uchiha? In a kind voice, the girl looked down and said, don't call me that. If you are who you say you are, then you already know who I am. After all, there are only 2 of us left. If you are here to kill me, go ahead, because I don't want to live after what I did. I killed them all. Cage was wide-eyed a moment and leaned back against a tree and said, so you must be Itachi then, but I always thought Itachi was a guy. The girl looked up at him and said in a low voice, you're right. I am supposed to be a guy, but I was born a girl. My father made me pretend to be a guy my entire life, even going as far as to learning Tsunade Genjutsu to make myself look like a guy, because he said having a girl as the oldest and heir to the Uchiha clan was a disgrace. I tried everything to make him happy. I was the youngest Anbu captain ever. Graduated early. Activated my Sharingan early. It was never enough. Then I decided to leave, and he had my best friend try and kill me, but not before he tried to rape me, and I killed him and got these damn eyes. Cage sighed and said, so that's why you killed your father and best friend. Why did you kill the rest besides Sasuke, and why spare him? The girl looked up at him and said, my father, after he found out about me trying to leave, had the entire clan besides my brother torture me in the Uchiha prison for 3 days, and then they dragged me in front of my father and brother as a disgrace, and then he acted like it was all my fault, and he was the respectable leader of the clan. That's why I killed them all. They deserved it. Cage looked at her, hearing the hurt in her voice, and asked, so is Itachi your real name, or do you have another name? The girl looked down for a moment and said, Nan. Cage smiled and said, hardship, huh? I suppose that would be appropriate. Well, Nan-chan, what do you plan to do now? Nan asked, why should I tell you? Hell, why did I even answer your questions in the first place? I should just kill you and leave. Cage said sadly, it hurts, doesn't it? Making Nan look at him. Cage continued and said, the loneliness of pretending to be something you're not and never being seen as what you really are. I know that pain well. You asked me why you told me all this. The answer is simple. You held it in so long that you want someone to understand, even if it's a stranger. You know your life could end at any moment, and you want a moment of peace, just for someone to see you as yourself. Nan looked down as a tear fell down her cheek and said, I don't know what I am going to do. I got an invite to join a group, but I don't really want to, even if the Hokage asked me to. Cage looked at her and said, why would the old man want you to join Akatsuki? Nan looked at him, forgetting her problems, and asked, how do you know them? Cage said, I know them because I know that they contacted you, or rather Itachi. I make anything to do with them my business. Nan asked, why are you interested in them? Cage sighed and said, I have a deal for you. Forget the old Mont's request. I can give him all the info he will ever need on the group, including all of their plans and members. Hell, I have already either killed or hired 2 people they wanted to join them. I can get you off the bingo books as well and give you a new home as well as allies if you will join me. Hell, I can even get you back in Konoha as the real you and people won't be hunting you. All I have to do is tell people you're Itachi twin sister and that your father had sent you out of the village as a disgrace and then me and you killed the real Itachi, or you could even join my new village. What do you say? Nan thought a moment and Kage said, this way your brother can go on living and you can actually have the life with him as the real you if you chose to, but personally I would like to bitch slap him a few times, but I got issue with him, so that's my opinion. Nan asked, why do you have issues with my brother? Looking at Kage, Kage sighed and said, if you join me in my group I promise that when I find Jiraiya and Tsunade I will tell you and everyone everything including who I really am. At that point you can leave and do as you wish, but join me until then. Then if you decide not to join me then I will keep my promise and get you back to Konoha if you want, under the story I said earlier. The old man owes me big time anyways and I will call in a few favors he owes me to make sure everything goes okay for you. Nan thought a moment and said, fine. I will join you until I know the truth. Then I will decide. Kage said. Fair enough, come. The others are probably getting drunk now anyways. By the way, don't use the Mangekyo Sharingan if you can keep from it. Using it causes blindness and eventually death. As he took off through the trees with Nan behind him. Nan asked, how do you know that? I was told only one other person ever got it. Kage said. True. Madara got it when he killed the Shadaime Hokage, but Kakashi also has it, but he got it from a stupid training exercise, so he did not have to kill his best friend for his. But I know about the Sharingan because I know the creature that made the Sharingan in the first place. As he smirked as Nan got wide-eyed a moment and continued to follow. About 30 minutes later they arrived in a small town and walked into a bar and said, son of a bitch. As he looked at the group who was there and saw them all drinking and also saw some other people in the room he knew. He walked by the group and Zabuza said, what's up with him? As they looked at him walk by. Kage walked by and walked to a man at the bar and stabbed him in the back of the head before turning and walking back where he came from. He sat down and said, go ahead and join us, Nan. Nobody will hurt you, I promise. Nan walked over and asked, why did you kill that man? Kage said, simple. He works for Danzo, and since I know Danzo is selling out the Leaf Village right now, any of his men I cross paths with I kill, so that way they won't be able to report back to him about my movements yet. Now that the group is here, let's talk. Angel asked, who's the girl? Kage said, this is Uchiha Nan, formerly known as Uchiha Itachi. Long story short, she's with us for now. Now you are all wondering about me and my secrets, so I will tell you everything. No. My real name is not Arachnar Kage. Instead it is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, son of Kushina Uzumaki and Minato Namikaze. Former Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Nan asked, wait, what do you mean former, and are you really a Namikaze? Kage reached up to his mask and pulled it off and said, yes. Nan said, you can't be Naruto, you don't look like him and you're too old. Angel laughed and said, that was one of the bonuses I gave him before we came back in time to change the future. I gave him the ability to shapeshift along with his bloodline that and most of my chakra, making everyone at the table wide-eyed. Zabuza said, wait, you're Kyuubi. Angel said, why else do you think I choose a fox form? Nan asked, why did you attack Konoha? Angel said, simple. Before Konoha was formed I met 3 men. One was the Shadaime Hokage of Konoha and his brother. The third man was a Hyuga named Hyuga Madara. They each came to me asking for help to start a new hidden village so that they could quit being a group of homeless exiles. I listened to them and I agreed, and I gave all 3 a bloodline. The Shadaime ability to plants that would allow the new village to build homes as well as grow plants for food faster. The second I gave the ability to use water so they would not die of thirst. The third I gave the ability to use fire as well as protect the new village. I gave him the Sharingan, making him the first Uchiha. They agreed to always look after each other and led their people. I never seen 2 of them, but the third one came to me a little over 1 week before I attacked Konoha. Madara appeared in my cave and he told me how he gained the final level of the Sharingan by killing his best friend the Shadaime Hokage, and I asked him how he was still alive. He bragged about how he created a jutsu that allowed him immortality by taking over the body of another. He attacked me in my cave with the Mangekyo Sharingan Amaterasu and hurt me with it. He then bragged how he was the new leader of Konoha and that his army was waiting for me before he left while I was still being burned by Amaterasu for the next 7 days and nights. I was so pissed off when it wore off that I attacked to get revenge. Turned out it was a trap and the kid's dad sealed me into him. Kisame asked, "How are you out if you were sealed?" Kage said, "Simple. When I was 22 years old, Konoha had betrayed me so much in my life even after I saved the village when Orochimaru attacked Konoha, brought back Sasuke after he defected to Orochimaru, killed off Akatsuki, defeated Iwa, became the next Toad Sannin, convinced Tsunade to become Godime Hokage of Konoha after the third died against Orochimaru. My own fiancé at the time who was Tsunade apprentice left me at the altar to be with Sasuke and I don't mean Shizune. The council after Tsunade named me Rokudime Hokage of Konoha right before she passed away waited until I stood in front of the village to make my Hokage acceptance speech to say that they voted during the 3 days of mourning over Tsunade passing that Sasuke would be the next Hokage and made me the laughing stock of the village. Add that to over 15,000 attacks on my life, not to mention never being allowed to buy anything beside ramen and useless weapons. Angel here offered me a choice. She gave me a chance to not only come back in time and do things the way I want but also gave me back my mother and father who are alive now and also Tsunade fiancé Dan and her little brother Naoki who are alive now and are doing missions for me secretly right now. My plan is simple. I am going to stop Orochimaru again but this time before he kills the Sandaime Hokage. I am also going to give the people I care about the happiness they always wanted. Kill Danzo. I am also going to show my true skills and give Konoha a choice. See me as who I really am or I am going to turn my back on them after I save the Sandaime. Take out Akatsuki, save a few countries, end the bloodline war in Mist and start a new hidden village that will be the best ever that won't be like Konoha that disrespects its citizens. I already know where it is going to be. And you asked me why I have a problem with your little brother Nan. Simple. Over the next 7 years your brother will be treated like a king and treat everyone else like shit. He will then learn Kakashi Chidori after Kakashi treats him as a god while ignoring me and his other student to the point Kakashi basically told me I was not worth the time to train for the Chunin exam finals where I was going against the Hyuga prodigy while Sasuke who at the time had Orochimaru curse seal on him was going against an opponent he had no chance to defeat. I found Jiraiya during the month break while he was doing his research at a bathhouse and he taught me to summon Gambunta as well as remove the 5-star seal Orochimaru had put on me when I saved your brother's life again. The first time was against Haku here who was the apprentice of Zabuza after he became a missing nin for failing to kill the Mizukage. Guess we did that right this time huh? Kisame would have joined Akatsuki and became your partner. Raiga here would have done funeral all day long to a village until he killed himself with a lightning jutsu. After that Sasuke would use Kakashi Chidori on me 2 times at the Valley of the End to gain those eyes and I tried everything to stop him without killing him. Kakashi for his part had only taught me how to climb a tree with chakra and it was not until I came back from a 3-year training trip with Ero Sannin that he even tried to teach me anything and at that point I was fighting life and death battling S-rank missing nin at least 2 times a month. Over the next few years I would have that same jutsu used on me 7 more times and then he walks back into Konoha, serves at the academy one day as punishment and told not to do it again and then he took not only my fiancé but also the only thing in my life I wanted more than anything. Yeah, I really don't like your brother and I plan to humiliate his ass every chance I get and try and make him see he is not a king and that he is not the best in the world and can treat people like shit. Have you heard enough Jiraiya, Tsunade, Shizune? As he looked behind him and see 3 heads flinch. Jiraiya who turned asked, then what was it Kyuubi got out of the deal? Angel said, simple, I get to be his first wife and released from the seal and I am only at about Sannin level strength. The rest went to him and since he has a bloodline he can have multiple wives if he chose to. Zabuza asked, how do you plan to start this village of yours and what are you going to do if Konoha decided to accept you? Naruto said, simple. I am making this village cage system completely different than other villages. I am making it where a person cannot be caged for more than 10 years and a person cannot serve on the council longer than 5 years. That way a cage has 2 councils he or she can use to make the village better. I am going to be the Shadaime Namikage though if Konoha refuses to accept me then. When my term is over, I will stay there and raise a family and maybe teach some students. My father is going to be the Nadime Namikage. I was thinking one of you three will be the Sandame Namikage, but have not decided which yet, since it's not just my decision but my father's as well. Nan asked. Why 10 years for a cage? Naruto said. Simple. The problem with most hidden villages is that the leaders get so bogged down in paperwork they don't have time to see the needs of its people and become weakened by it. Also, there is a chance one could be killed, and with this system you have a trained replacement already until the next one can be chosen. Most cages now don't even have time to be with their family half the time. I decided it would be this way so that way the people always have a strong leader who knows what it's like for the people so they can make any changes that need to be made. Jiraiya asked, what about funding? It costs a lot of money for a village. Naruto said. Simple. I already have one trade alliance made for the hidden village and I have 3 others I can get since I know what's happening in those countries. I also currently own 1/4 of Konoha and I am getting some pretty good payout of the businesses and rental properties. I also have the money from my book sales and the bounties I have taken. One thing I learned from you was information gathering and also to write. You're looking at the author of the Hermit's Diary series. Suddenly 3 shrieks could be heard and Naruto covered his ears and looked around and paled and said, oh hell. And saw Nan, Haku, and Shizune, all 3 had copies of the book in their hands. Naruto sighed and signed them and Raiga said, I'm sorry but I don't believe you. Do you have any proof? Naruto smiled and reached for a scroll and unsealed it and out popped a bottle of sake and Naruto said, this my friends is no ordinary bottle of sake. It was a wedding present from the Shinigami himself when Angel and I went to talk to him about giving Dad and the others back their lives. It is a mixture of some holy wine and some other stuff. It has every one of my memories from my last life in it and all you have to do is take a sip and you will remember it all from the moment I first cried until I met the Shinigami the second time. It's your choice to drink or not. Nan, can you put me a drop of your blood on a saucer please? As he poured 8 saucers of sake. Nan did and he picked it up and got up and walked over to the man he killed, put the drop of blood on the monk's head and started doing hand signs and said, demonic religion art, mask of the forgotten, and slammed his hands onto Mon's head and the body started to glow and then it changed and became the corpse of Itachi. Naruto then pulled off his sword and cut off the Mon's head and put it in a scroll before walking back over to the table and said, well, it's official now. Uchiha Itachi is officially dead. Tsunade asked, why are the people in this bar ignoring everything? I mean, you killing that man and us talking about demons and death and all the stuff we are and nobody has said or done anything. Angel laughed, making everyone look at her, and she said, I used a kitsune illusion the moment we walked in and I saw the 3 of you. The rest of the bar think this table is full of old women talking about needlepoint while drinking water, and the man Naruto killed was made to look like he left so nobody will know anything until about an hour after we leave and then the body will appear and nobody will know how. Haku asked, can I drink that? Pointing to the saucer. Naruto said, yeah, I poured one for each of you except me and Angel since we already know everything. Haku nods and reaches for one and Tsunade stopped her and said, I will go first. If it's a lie and it's poisoned I can heal myself. Making everyone nod. She picked one up and downed it and after a moment grabbed her head and scrunched her eyes closed and sat like that for about a minute and let a tear fall and asked, how the hell are you still sane? As she looked at Naruto. Naruto smiled and said, my precious people. Tsunade nods and said, he's telling the truth and Jiraiya, I'm going to kill you for making him use his pervert ninjutsu and then try and grope it while drunk as soon as this headache goes away. Angel said, it will take about a day for it to go away. Normally it knocks a person out when they use it, but since Naruto did not actually die and came back after only 22 years there were not a full lifetime of memories. Tsunade chuckles and said, you actually kicked Orochimaru in the balls. Hell, you even called Kisame here sushi and shoved a Rasengan up his ass using Kakashi 1000 years of death. As she closed her eyes and smiled at the memories. She then narrowed her eyes and said, Jiraiya, remember those kids you trained during the war? Well, 2 of them are the leaders of Akatsuki. The girl and the one with the Rinnegan. Jiraiya was wide-eyed and said, I thought they all died. Naruto said, Jiraiya, I will say this and I mean it. Don't go after them. You will die if you do and I don't want to see that happen again. It took 9 of the most powerful ninja to ever come out of Konoha to take him down. 3 of us were Sannin level. Even now I won't go against him. I won't be ready to face him until I am probably 14 or 15 after the Chunin exams. Jiraiya looked at the sake and took it and drank it. Naruto reached into his pocket and said, "Here Tsunade. This is yours." Handing her the Raijin. Tsunade looked at Haku and said, "Go ahead Haku. You need to see it and I am going to start teaching you to be a medic nin. You have a knack for it from what I saw." Haku drank it and Nan asked, "If you have memories of me as Itachi, why are you being nice to me now?" Naruto sighed, leaning back, closing his eyes and said, "Kisame, Nan, I won't lie to you. Before I met you both during this life I had planned to kill you both before you joined Akatsuki. When I first met you I was 14 years old right after the Sandaime died. You were the 2 members who were assigned to hunt me down to extract Kyuubi from me. I don't know what happened between now and then, but whatever happened changed you both greatly. One of you took pleasure out of torturing people mentally while the other did it physically. When I met Kisame this time I saw that he was different from the one I knew. Nan, you however are totally different. I understand the pain you felt better than everyone because I lived it my entire life in Konoha. You had to be something you're not. I had to also, because if I ever showed people I was smarter than the dead last in class they would have executed me. Before I was 5 years old I counted there being a total of 1,215 times that the council asked the old man to execute me. I see in you a part of me. A part that wants someone to accept you for who you are and let you be happy. It's why I dreamed of being Hokage." Zabuza asked, "What happens to me?" Haku said, "You died killing a man who betrayed us after I gave my life to save you from a man named Kakashi." As she let a tear fall and she looked at Naruto and asked, "Am I one of your precious people?" Naruto said, "Yes." Zabuza sighed and said, "What the hell, you could kill me anytime you want, so I might as well see what makes you tick." As he grabbed it and swallowed it. Nan looked at it and said, "Why not? It's not like I have anything to live for anyways." Naruto opened his eyes as fast as lightning and reached across and slapped her across the face and said, "Don't ever say that again, Nan-chan. Your father may have been an asshole like the rest of your clan, but you're the first Uchiha I met that doesn't make me feel like shoving a Rasengan down their throat. You beautiful and should show the world that beauty." As he sighed and leaned back, closing his eyes. Everyone looked at him and Angel sighed and said, "You just hit one of his 2 weaknesses. He can't stand to see people crying unless they're tears of joy, and he can't stand to see people being sad, saying they have nothing to live for. If that was the case he would have killed himself the moment I was sealed in him." Looking down. Nan said, "Naruto, I'm." Naruto said, "Don't, Nan-chan, you have nothing to be sorry for. If anyone should be sorry, it's me. I usually don't let my emotions make me act on impulse. Look, I need some air. You can all choose to drink or not, and if you decide not to help me, I won't hold it against you, because the moment I walked in I cast a jutsu that will make you forget what you heard if you don't want to help, so I don't have to worry about you betraying me. You're all free to make your own decisions." As he got up and started toward the door when Angel turned into a fox and jumped onto his shoulder before he left. Jiraiya said, "I can't believe this kid. He learned the Rasengan in a little over a month and kicked more S-rank ass than anyone I ever seen in my life. He even saved your ass, Tsunade." Tsunade nods and said, "By right I think he deserves this." As she pulled out her necklace. Shizune gasped and said, "But Tsunade, that's your grandfather's necklace." Tsunade grabbed the sake and said, "Shizune, drink it and then tell me he does not deserve it." Shizune eyed it a moment and sipped it before passing out, and Jiraiya said, "She never could hold her sake." Raiga said, "What the hell, I might be able to do a funeral for him." As he drank it. Kisame looked at Zabuza and said, "What do you think, Zabuza?" Zabuza said, "The kid's got more balls than anyone I ever seen. You know he's only 8 years old right now and he kicked all 3 of our asses at one point or another." Kisame said, 8 years old, are you shitting me? Raiga said, "Nope, he was born 8 years ago. The kid kicked my ass several times in a few days. He kicked yours a lot, Kisame." As he chuckled with his eyes closed. Kisame looked at Nan and said, "So what are you going to do, Uchiha?" Everyone chuckled but those 2, and Nan asked, "What?" Jiraiya said, "In Naruto other life Kisame always followed your orders." Nan sighed and said, Damn it, I got no choice because I won't sit here and be made a laughing stock without knowing why. As she took it and drank it, leaving only one, which Kisame took and drank. Everyone sat there a few moments and Nan said, I need some time to think. As she got up and left. Naruto was sitting outside of town and said, what do you think, Angel? Do you think I made the right choice? Angel sighed and said, Kit. Remember when you had the choice to kill Gaara or not to kill him during the invasion? Naruto said, yeah, what about it? As he looked at her. Angel said, you had every right to kill him at that moment, but you did not. You turned an enemy into one of the greatest allies you would ever have. The same thing happened with Zabuza. You have an ability that changed people and you should not doubt yourself. If any of them decide to leave, it's their choice, and like you said, you used that jutsu so they won't remember anything for the last day except they wanted to leave for some reason. Naruto sighed and said, you know, sometimes I don't know what to do. I want people to be happy so bad that I let my emotions through. I should not have slapped her back there. A ninja does not show his or her emotions. Angel snickered and said, yeah, right. If that's the case, you should never have become a ninja. You always let your emotions show through and it made you who you are. Naruto nods and said, you're right, want to spar? As he jumps out of the tree they were sitting in. Angel jumped down, changing into her human form, and said, let's do this in your real body. Naruto nods and closes his eyes and changes down to a 5'1" kid of 8 years old, and he took off his shirt and threw it over by a tree and said, let's dance. As he started doing hand signs and said, Fuden. Reppu K's Hitofuki Jutsu, and a strong wind came blowing from him toward Kyuubi, who did her own hand signs and said, Kaden. Ryu Yofun Jutsu, and breathed out a stream of fire that burst into 5 dragons that hit the wind and charged toward Naruto. Naruto jumped back doing hand signs and said, Sweden. Gurito Suiheki Jutsu, and a wall of water shot out of the ground 30 feet long, blocking the fire. Naruto then said, Kajbunshin no Jutsu. And 10 Naruto appeared. Angel smirked and said, Mizu Bunshin Jutsu, and 30 water clones appeared out of the water Naruto used earlier. Naruto started doing hand signs and said, Raiden. Ikazukigeki Jutsu, and 12 lightning bolts burst out of the sky and struck the water clones, jumping from one to the next, destroying them. Angel had to jump back as the 10 Kage Bunshins began fighting her in taijutsu. Suddenly 2 kicked her in the air saying, Nah. Another kicked her higher. Raw. Then 1 kicked her to the left. 2. Then another kicked her up again. Death. Then 2 appeared above her and punched her toward the ground. Then 3 appear in a triangle around her and grabbed onto her, starting to spin saying, Drop. Slamming into the ground with her in their arms when the last one fell out of the sky with a Rasengan in his hand saying, Rasengan. Slamming it into her stomach before jumping back as she explodes. A set of kunais came and sliced all of the clones, and Naruto grabbed the one coming for him and threw it back where it came from, doing hand signs saying, Ninpu. Shuriken Kage Bunshin Jutsu, turning it into 50. He then turned around and pulled out a shuriken and started doing hand signs and said, Ninpu. Shuriken Kage Bunshin Jutsu, and the one turned into 30. A shout of, Doden. Dotaijin Heki Jutsu, was heard and a wall of earth came blocking both kunai and shurikens. Naruto smirked doing some one-hand signs and said, Here's something new that I have been working on. And chakra strings came out of his fingers grabbing the single kunai and shuriken since the rest went up in smoke, and he pulled them toward him before he used replacement, making Angel appear where he was and both impaled in her arms, making her cry out. Naruto appeared and said, First blood. I win. Naruto, master of the jutsus. Clapping could be heard and Naruto turned and saw Nan standing there, and she said, You're pretty good. For a midget. A vein appeared on Naruto's head and he closed his eyes and changed back into his cage form, and he walked over and picked up his shirt and looked where Nan was, and sweat dropped and said, Damn it, she's a pervert, noticing the blood on the ground leading to where she had flown back to. He turned and saw Angel smirking and said, You okay? Angel pulled out the weapons and the wounds started to heal, and she said, Yeah, what should we do with her? Naruto closed his eyes and said, Angel, how long until Gato appears in wave? Angel thought and said, According to what we were told, about a year. Why? Naruto looked at Nan and said, Oh, it's nothing. Let's take her back to the others and see what they decided. As he walked over and picked Nan up and carried her bridal style. When Naruto got back to town, he saw that everyone was walking toward him, and Tsunade asked, "What happened to her?" Naruto said, "She's a pervert." Nan then said with her eyes closed, "I'm an Uchiha and we are not perverts." Naruto looked at her before dropping her on the ground, causing her to say, "OWW, what the hell you do that for?" Naruto said, "For making me feel sorry for you." Nan said, "HNN." Naruto slapped his head and said, "Damn it, I thought for sure you were not a real Uchiha, you just had to go and ruin my dream." Angel snickered and with narrowed eyes Nan asked, "What the hell that supposed to mean?" Naruto said, "Simple, from what I've gathered every Uchiha's first word is HNN." Nan said, "Really? Contact force hypnosis." As she held her finger and Naruto looked at her. She then raised it up to her eye level and said, "Tsukiyomi." Naruto world went black and then he was pulled into the Tsukiyomi world and Nan appeared in front of him and he was tied to a stake and she said, "For the next 72 hours you shall hear me say HNN to you constantly," with a smirk on her face. Naruto snickered and said, "Really? Too bad Angel made my bloodline more powerful than yours. Kitsune Dream World," and suddenly the world changed from the Tsukiyomi world to a blue world and Nan found herself tied to a cross. Naruto appeared in front of her and said, "For the next 72 hours I shall make you horny by having every single scene I have ever thought of for my books to appear in front of you while you are unable to release yourself, as your body will feel everything the woman you see feel without being able to finally climax yourself." Nan's eyes got wide and she said, "You can't do this." Naruto smiled an evil smile and said, "Watch me." And he disappeared and soon a couple appeared and they started flirting, making out, and then full-blown sex. After the woman had 3 orgasms, Naruto appeared and saw Nan panting and he said, 71 hours 59 minutes and 59 seconds to go. As he disappeared and another couple appeared starting all over again. Nan screamed out, "Oh oh 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 h," and the world returned to normal and she collapsed on her knees panting and Naruto walked over to her picking her up and making her look at him and he said, "Come for me." As he touched her back sending a pulse of chakra into her spine and she screamed, "Oh oh 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 h gu audi mmmmm kuam mmmmmmmimmmmmmmmmggggg," as she panted hard and heavy before passing out, shocking everyone. Jiraiya had his notebook out writing quickly and he asked, "What did you do to her?" Naruto smiled and said, "The Sharingan on its final level has a genjutsu world where the Sharingan user can torture someone for 72 hours in a second. My bloodline can do the same, but instead of torture I made her watch every scene I ever had for my books played out while she felt like she was the one experiencing it, but she never was allowed to climax. So for 3 days she been ready to have an orgasm and I sent a burst of chakra to the pleasure center in her spine sending her over the edge." Tsunade's sweat dropped and Angel smirked and said, "Damn, no wonder Kakashi called you the #1 hyperactive knucklehead ninja. You never do things normal." Naruto smiled and asked, "So what have you all decided?" Nan mumbled, "Naruto-kun," in a sleepy voice and everyone's sweat dropped and Zabuza said, "Well, I made a deal and I will follow it through." Jiraiya asked, "So what's your plan, Gaki?" Naruto looked around and saw everyone nodding and he looked at the girl who was passed out and he pulled out a scroll and unsealed a water balloon and held it above Nan and made a Rasengan shattering it, soaking her, making her scream out and look around. Naruto smiled and said, "I'm sorry I made you all wet, but I need to know what you decided." Nan was red face catching the double meaning and said, "I guess I will join you," trying to act as if everything was normal. Angel snickered and Nan said, "HNN." Naruto narrowed his eyes and said, "Leather." And Nan turned bright red and said, "Sorry Naruto-sama," making everyone sweat drop. Angel said, "Why do I get the funny feeling I'm going to be seeing a lot more of Nan?" Naruto said, "Right, well, here's what I got planned. I lied to you all about something earlier, so I guess I can tell you all now that sake had another purpose besides having all my memories." Making everyone look at him and Shizune asked, "What else did it do?" In a scared voice. Naruto said, "Tsunade, I know this might make you mad and you might refuse, but it's the easiest way to explain, so please drop the genjutsu on you and show everyone what you look like underneath." Tsunade said, "Why should I do that?" With a hint of anger in her voice. Angel snickered and said, "Since you now have the body of a 21-year-old you don't need it." Making Tsunade wide-eyed and she asked, "What do you mean?" Naruto sighed and said, Right now none of you can die of old age. All of you over the age of 21 will have your body return to as healthy as you were at that age and you will quit aging. Those of us under the age of 21 will age normally until we get that age and then stop aging. You are all basically immortal. You won't die from aging, but you can die from being killed, though that's a bit harder now. You all also have a minor healing ability, though not as good as mine and Angel's, but it should be about 30% faster than your normal one. Tsunade dropped her genjutsu and everyone gasped, and she looked at her skin and felt her face and asked, "How?" Naruto looked at Angel and she said, "Naruto here, when I gave him almost all my power, actually became the new king of demons, so unless someone kills him he will never die. Since the blood that was mixed in it was from him, you all got the same effect as him, meaning you are all basically immortal." Jiraiya asked, "Why did you do this?" Naruto said, "Orochimaru has the ability to take over the body of another human just as Uchiha Madara does. Originally he would have tried to take over Nan here, but then after he failed and was forced to flee Akatsuki, he will then go after her brother. When he attacks Konoha, I am going to need both Ero Sanin and Tsunade Bachan to be as strong as possible, so that way we can stop him." Shizune asked, "What other effects will this have on us?" Naruto said, "Well, I will tell you this, there is a jutsu that I will teach you all to cancel the effect of it making your normal again, but you will age normal afterwards from the age of 21. Tsunade, you will be able to have children again as well, but I want to make a request." Tsunade, who was wide-eyed, nodded, and Naruto said, "As I said, Dan and Naoki are both alive and I will be bringing them to you in a little over a year when I start the new hidden village. My request is this, I know you love Dan, but please give Ero Sanin a chance. He loves you dearly and has been by your side all these years, even though he is a total pervert. You all have a new chance at life and I want to see you all happy. Hell, if you want you can marry both if you chose to, but I am not saying you have to, but at least think about his feelings also." Tsunade looked at Jiraiya, who was wide-eyed, and Naruto said, "Okay, here is my plan. You all have the ability to shapeshift as Angel and myself does. Just think about what you want to look like and then think shapeshift and it will automatically do the rest. Zabuza, Raiga, I would like you both to return to the mist and track down all bloodline users you can find and try to convince them to leave the mist. Get them ready, and in exactly 14 months I will send a fleet of ships to the mist to pick them up with an escort of naval ships." Kisame asked, "How do you have a fleet like that?" Angel smiled and said, "The kid here had me over the last 5 years by almost every shipping fleet out there as a partner or owner besides those that belong to Gato." Kisame nods and Naruto said, "Nan, Kisame, you both work well together, so using your shapeshifting ability I want you both to go to Cloud and I want Nan to use her bloodline to try and steal as many lightning jutsu as she can while you both track down a Jinchuriki named Niyugito. I want you to convince her to leave the Cloud. She should still be in the academy, and if her life is like the rest of the Jinchuriki then it's hell. Once you get her, get out of there, travel with her while training her, and just look for any missing nins that you think might be good for a new village. No rapists or mass murderers. Most missing nins left because of politics or clans, but a few who just like to kill and other stuff. Remember Nan, Itachi's dead. You and I killed him when he came to kill you off." Kisame nods and Nan asked, "What's so special about her?" Naruto said, "Simple, besides Gaara, who is in Suna and is important for the future, she is the only one of the Jinchurikis I know the actual location of. If we get her, that will ensure that Akatsuki won't get their hands on her. If I can stop them from getting Gaara and her, then they have no chance to get the others because they have to extract them in order from weakest to strongest." Nan nods and Tsunade asked, "What do you want me to do?" Naruto said, "I want you to take Haku-chan here and train her as best as you can to be a medic nin and also to fight. I have a plan for the Chunin exams and I want her to be on the Genin team that I send to the exams for the new hidden village." Tsunade nods and Shizune said, "I'm staying with Tsunade." Naruto said, "I had already counted on that. I was hoping you can take this and pay off all Tsunade debts," and handed her a checkbook. Everyone was wide-eyed and Shizune said, "But there's no way you can afford that." Naruto smiled and said, "Don't worry about money, I got that taken care of. Also, if you remember what I said earlier to Zabuza, Raiga, Kisame, and Suigetsu, that account was set up 5 years ago and you are already registered as the primary account holder. I don't even mess with it after I put the first 2 billion in it and let it get interest. Everyone was wide-eyed the way he talked about money, and Jiraiya asked, "What do you have planned for me?" Naruto said, "Simple, you have all my memories now of what I knew of Akatsuki. I want you to try and gather more info on them, but do not confront them. I also need you to report to the old man on anything he wants to know, as long as it's nothing about this group of people or me. I have to make sure Danzo does not get wind of this, or he will try and have us all eliminated before we have a chance to succeed." Kisame asked, "What are you planning on doing?" Naruto sighed and said, "For the next year I am going to cash in the bounty on Itachi, and then I am going to collect a few other bounties as Arachnar Cage. Then in about a year I will go to Wave Country and stop the execution of Inari's father. That will be the catalyst that will bring all my planning to fruition. It is then that I will convince the people of Wave to allow me to build a hidden village there and build the bridge that will help the country to prosper. It is at that time I want you all to come to Wave after you hear about the bridge being built. When that happens, we will have about 4 years to train and build the village. Jiraiya and I, along with Dad, will set seals up to help us make sure no one knows more than we want them to. Tsunade will train and help get the hospital and medic nins up and going, and we will make sure her idea of having a medic on every team is a reality. At the end of the 4 years I will return to Konoha so I can be with the Rookie 9 and Guy's team. When I graduate from the academy, besides the knowledge of Orochimaru attacking Konoha, I figure everything I know is useless." Everyone seemed to think, and Nan asked, "What do you plan to do about my brother?" Naruto closed his eyes and said, "Nan, I don't know yet." Nan sighed and said, "I understand and trust you." Naruto said, "Well everyone. This is goodbye for now." Tsunade said, "Catch," as she threw him the Raijin and the Shadaime's necklace. Naruto caught them both and she said, "They belong to you. You earned them." Naruto smiled and said, "You sure?" Tsunade nods and said, "Yes." Naruto puts the necklace on and pocketed the Raijin and said, "Well everyone, I guess I will see you all in a year." Nan walked over to him and slapped him across the face and then kissed him and said, "Don't think I'm going to let that slide." Naruto smiled and said, "Like whipped cream," making her beet red again, and she said, "HNN." Stomping away, and Naruto said, "Keep safe Kisame, you to Nan-chan." Nan said, "Don't call me Chan." Over her shoulder. Naruto snickered and said, "Whatever you say Nanheim." Making her trip and quickly regain her balance, and Angel said, "You know, I think you enjoyed that." Naruto said, "Hell yeah. In the future she was a total emotionalist bastard. I will do whatever I can to make sure she does not turn out the same." Angel said, "You also like her?" As she changed into her fox form and got on his shoulder. Zabuza said, "Kid, I get the feeling you are going to be interesting to be around." Naruto nods and said, "If you see that Suigetsu kid, try and avoid him. He knows your swords since he wants yours, Zabuza, so no amount of shapeshifting will save you if he rats you out." He nods, and Raiga said, "I can always give him a funeral." Naruto said, "Not yet. Right now he's just a kid who was pissed that we killed the Mizukage." Zabuza asked, "I have been meaning to ask, how did you use Kawarimi no Jutsu with a living target so easily?" Naruto said, "I use it as my first step in flash stepping." Raiga asked, "What's that?" Naruto smiles and said, "It's an improved version of the Hiraishin no Jutsu." Everyone's eyes got wide at that, and both men nod before leaving. Haku asked, "Kage-sama, what is it you wish for me to do?" Naruto sighs before changing back into his actual appearance and said, "Haku-chan, listen to me. You don't have to follow me as if you were some kind of tool. You are a human being and a very beautiful young lady. You just need to let yourself live a little and train to use your bloodline, and when you find something you want, go after it. Find yourself a dream and be happy. I know that's what your mother would want, and your father also, if he was not an idiot about bloodlines." Haku nods, and Naruto looked at Tsunade and said, "Please take care of her and get yourself ready also. After all, you do have someone to meet in a little over a year." Tsunade nods and said, "Come on Haku, let's get started." And she turned and started to walk away, and Haku ran up and kissed Naruto on the cheek and said, "Bye," before she ran after Tsunade, with Shizune shaking her head leaving. Jiraiya smiled and said, "Yo kid. Want to sign the Toad contract again?" Naruto said, "I do, but I want you to ask Gambunta if I can, since I already have the Fox contract." If he agrees, tell him I will sign it again when I meet you again. Jiraiya nods and asked, I wanted to ask you. Why did you kill the Mizukage? Naruto said, because he wanted me to kill Haku and then he tried to ambush me with the 3 swordsmen. Jiraiya nods and said, well, I will see you in a year or so. Naruto nods and after he's gone Naruto sighed and said, Angel. Can you do something for me? Angel looked at him and said, what? Naruto said, I think I went too hard on Nan, so would you mind taking a scroll to her that says I'm sorry? Angel sighed and said, you're too good for you own good Naruto. Sure. You're planning on going and finding her, aren't you? Naruto looked at Angel and asked, who? Angel said, Chio, that's who. Naruto sighed as he wrote on a scroll and said, yeah. I want to find her before Akatsuki takes her from me again. Angel nods and said, I will meet you in Iwa then. As she took the scroll and ran off into the woods. Naruto sighed and looked at the sky and took off running toward Iwa. About an hour later Kisame and Nan were walking through the woods when they heard a voice yell, hey, wait up. And they turned and saw a fox coming toward them and when it got close turned into Angel. Kisame asked, what are you doing here? Angel pulled out a scroll and said, Naruto asked me to deliver this to Nan. As she handed it to the Uchiha. Nan looked confused and opened it and read. Nan. About earlier, I'm sorry. I guess I just wanted to help you forget about all the sadness you had earlier and decided a prank would be best. I did not mean to do any harm and should have considered your feelings first. I hope you can forgive me. Naruto. Nan sighed and asked, why does he feel he needs to say he's sorry? Angel sighed and said, Chio. Both Kisame and Nan looked confused and Kisame asked, who's Chio? Angel sighed and said, I know you all have his memories but it takes time to get through them and sometimes your mind just kicks some of them out so I will just tell you about it. When Naruto was on his 3-year training trip with Jiraiya and he was almost 16 Jiraiya left him alone for about a month in June on some special Holy Land bullshit he talked about where Akatsuki would never find him. While he was there he found this girl sitting on a cliff looking out across a valley and that day just happened to have been her 21st birthday. She had black hair and a decent body I guess but she hid her face behind a plain mask. Naruto and her talked and he learned she was a Jinchuriki just like him for the Rokubi. She told him her name was Chio, which means forever and that she was cursed forever to loneliness and hardship. Over the month's time there they got close and he learned she had killed her entire clan because of them treating her as a weapon and also forcing a life on her that she did not want along with other things she refused to talk about. She even confessed that she had seen him as a child once when her father took her to Konoha to see what would happen to her if she ever betrayed her family. Near the end of the month they had fallen in love with each other and gave each other their innocence. They both knew Akatsuki was looking for them and so she made him promise that should they ever confront him and he was to run and never stop running. She also made him promise that should anything ever happen to him he would try and find someone who would love him for him. Unfortunately, Akatsuki found them one night. Naruto was asleep beside her and when he woke she was gone and there was a note for him saying that she had discovered Akatsuki was near them so she decided to sacrifice herself so he could escape. He wanted to kill them all but her last instructions for him were to live and not seek revenge and how she wished they could have met sooner and under other circumstances and that she would never speak to him in the afterlife if he did not try and move on. When he returned to Konoha that pink-haired bitch Sakura preyed on his emotions like a hawk to get him to retrieve Sasuke and then threw him away so now that he has a chance to redo things he's trying to find her. Nan here reminds him a lot of Chio and he made a promise to himself that he would never let her have a frown when he finally got to see her face and since you remind him of her he won't let you have a frown either and that's why he made that joke. Nan sighed and said, I see. So why are you being nice to me? By all rights you should kill both me and Kisame here and Naruto-kun would never know. Angel said. You surprised me in the last life and that's something that is not easy to do. Every time you confronted him you always called him Naruto-kun and never harmed him. Threatened but never harmed. Everyone else including your brother you left in a mess. I thought it was because you were gay like your brother but now that I know you're a woman I understand everything now though Naruto is as clueless as ever and since neither of you have crossed him in this life I am letting you both off without worry of me killing you. Looking at them both. Kisame said, I feel special. Sarcastically. Angel said, you should. Nan asked, What does he plan to do when he finds her if he finds her? Angel said. Simple. As I told you all, I am his first wife and concubine, but the truth is, even though he cares and respects me, he does not love me like he did her. He has never had anyone love him like that, and he thinks if he can find her, that after they get to know each other again, they might fall in love again. That is what he wants more than anything. Nan said nothing, and Angel said, well, you both have a lot to do and a lot to think about. See you later, Kisame, Itachi. As she turned back into a fox and jumped away. Kisame said, what the hell was that about? As he looked at Nan. Nan said, I don't know, Kisame. Apparently she looks underneath too much. Come, we must go. As she turned and starts walking away. Kisame sighs and said, why am I following you anyways? Nan said, simple. I am more than capable of killing you if I chose to. In her cold Uchiha voice. Kisame nods and said, I see your point. Want anything to eat? Nan said, yeah, Pocky. Kisame smirked and said, I knew I would like you. 6 months later, Cage was sitting in a bar in Iowa when a man who had a black cloak with red clouds on it slowly walks up, though he was hunched over, and said, are you a Rancor, Cage? Cage looks up and said, perhaps, who might you be? The man said, my name is Sasori. I was sent to make you an offer. Cage looked around and said, if so, then follow me out of town, because there are too many ears here. As he gets up and leaves with Sasori behind him. About 10 minutes later, Cage stops in the woods and said, okay, Sasori. What is this offer? Acting bored as he leans against a tree. Sasori said, I represent a group who have the means to rule the world, and we are looking for men of great power to help us rule the world after we take it over. You have become famous with killing Deidara and the Yondaime Mizukage and Uchiha Itachi. Our group would like for you to join. Cage sighed and said, if I were to guess based on how you're dressed, your group would be Akatsuki, and that you are currently planning on tracking down all the tailed beast. Sasori's eyes got wide a moment and asked, how do you know this? Cage said, Orochimaru confronted me about a month ago asking me to join, and he said it would be unwise for my health to join Akatsuki. I believe with the way he was acting he left your group, though I could be wrong. Sasori said, Orochimaru did indeed leave our group, and since you know of our organization and what we plan, what is your answer? Cage was silent a moment and said, you know, Sasori, that Chiyo has rebuilt your mother and father just so she can kill you. Especially after she found out that you killed the former Cage and made him a human puppet. Sasori said, you know too much, boy. Cage said, and you know even less than me. Next time don't ask the Kyuubi to join a group that is trying to kill it. As he disappeared in a puff of smoke, and suddenly he appeared out of the ground behind Sasori with the Raijin activated, slicing through the tail before he went up in smoke as a needle stabbed into the clone. Sasori said, I see, so you are a Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. A voice said, wrong. Kyuubi gave me all its power in exchange for its freedom, so your group has already failed. As Cage appeared on a tree branch above Sasori. Sasori said, we can still extract its power from you, boy. Now let's see you fight against my puppet army. As he unsealed a scroll and 100 puppets appeared. Cage said, mass shadow clone jutsu. And suddenly 1,000 Cage Bunshins appeared, and using Rasengans, Raijin, and Jutsu soon decimated the army. Sasori chuckled and said, my boy. You are very good, though those are my weak puppets and I can easily replace them with bandits, but let's see you face my favorite puppet. The Sandame Cage himself. A puppet appeared and Cage said, so the famous Cage who could use the iron sand, though you made a mistake of following me to this spot in the forest, Sasori. I not only made sure you were alone but also found a spot that has a special metal in the ground. Amidst the army of shadow clones. Sasori narrowed his eyes and said, really, what might that be, boy? Cage said, simple, the Cage there uses the magnetic fields to control iron in the sand. However, if he were in a place that had pure iron with a high electric field going through it, then the ground would literally draw the iron out of the sand and into the ground to the iron. A Hyuga taught me this when she changed the electric current in a mon's body once. Suddenly all the Cage Bunshins started doing hand signs and they all said, Raiden. Shiko Ryu Jutsu. And the sky turned black as 10,000 plus bolts of lightning hit the ground in the field they were in, destroying all the clones. A few seconds later it was over and Cage appeared and Sasori said, that was impressive, boy, but useless. Iron sand. The cage puppet opened its mouth and sand shot out and flew into the air for about a second before slamming into the ground hard, making Sasori wide-eyed. Cage smirked and started walking towards Sasori, who started backing up and said, "You left your back exposed," making Sasori turn and blink as nothing was there. He turned back and saw Cage was gone also, and he looked around the clearing and tried to find his chakra but could not sense it and said, "Coward. I must return and inform the others," as he grabbed the scroll and resealed the cage. He then turned to grab his tail and slung it over his shoulder so he could repair it when he got back to base before starting to walk away. After a few minutes the tail went up in a puff of smoke, and before he had a chance to even react the Raijin was plunged through the body of the puppet Hirako. Cage jumped off and looked as a figure could be seen crawling out of the puppet body, and he had blood coming out of his mouth, and he asked in panted breaths, "How?" Cage said, "Simple. During the lightning storm you were so blinded by it that you failed to see me replace myself with your real tail. Then when my cage bunshin told you that you left you back open, you turned and using chakra strings to let the cage bunshin that had changed into a spider crawl into your armor through the hole I made when I cut off your tail. It sent me a mental message where it was, which was right over your heart. That was all I needed to know, and I released the henge and used the Raijin to plow through your armor. The one thing I like about the Raijin is that the more chakra you send into it, the more powerful it gets." Sasori coughed again and fell down on the ground, and Cage coughed as well and fell to his knees and said, "Angel, he got me with a poison," before he fell face first on the ground. Angel came walking out of her hiding spot and sighed as she started to heal him and looked over at Sasori. After she was finished, she took Sasori ring and then sealed the puppet Hirako and then grabbed the scroll for the Sandame cage. She then sealed the body of Sasori, which was easy since his body was a puppet, and then walked back over and picked up Naruto before taking him to their hotel room. A month later, Cage walked into a familiar bounty check-in station and said, "Hey Titus." Titus looked up and groaned and said, "Who the hell you kill this time?" Cage smirked and said, "Sasori of Suna." As he unsealed the body and said, "He turned his entire body into a puppet but his heart." Titus looked at it and said, "So the rumors are true about him. Very well. Here's your check for this one and have a vacation or something. Why? You're taking out all the bounties," as he turned through the book and started to write. Arankar Cage. SS rank. Age. Weight. Height estimated at 6 feet. Eyes. Hair. Home village. Skills. Hiraishin. Rasengan. Bloodline. Dressed in all black and has a white mask that had black eyes that is impossible to see through, and 4 red lines running vertically down the middle with 1 line going through each eye and the other 2 lines going down the nose. Carries a sword and is in the company of a fox. Also carries the Raijin as well as the Shadaime Hokage necklace as reward from Tsunade. Assassinated the daimyo of Snow Country as well as nearly 75 men to restore the rightful ruler to power. Killed the Yondaime Mizukage for what he describes as being an idiot for harassing bloodlines. Order by Sandame Hokage of Konoha. All Konoha nins are to leave person alone and avoid confrontation at all cost. Killed. S rank missing nin Anbu Captain Uchiha Itachi of Konoha. S rank missing nin Junin Sasori of Suna. S rank missing nin Junin Deidara of Iwa. A- rank missing nin Chunin Aoi Rokusho of Junin of Rain. B rank snow nin Chunin Nadare Ruga. B rank snow nin Chunin Kakuyoku Fubuki. B rank snow nin Chunin Fuyuguma Mizor. B rank missing nin Junin Suian of Waterfall. B rank rain nin Chunin Kirasame. B rank rain nin Chunin Hisame. B rank rain nin Chunin Murasama. Daimyo of Snow Country Kazuhana Dotu. Yondaime Mizukage Bura Tomas. Cage walked out of the bounty office and he heard a voice say, "Yo. Long time no see Cage," making him look up and see the face of one Hitaki Kakashi. Cage smirked and said, "It's been a while Kakashi, I just got done cashing in on Sasori of the Red Sand." "What you up to?" Kakashi said, "I was sent to ask you if you would come to Konoha because the Hokage would like to speak to you." Cage thought a moment and said, "I suppose a little trip to Konoha won't hurt, but I have to be somewhere in about a month, so we better hurry." Kakashi nods and Angel said, "Just to make sure Kakashi, this is not some kind of trap, right?" Kakashi said, "Now why would I be sent to walk you into a trap?" Cage said, "Simple, you have not only Guy with you but also Asuma, and the Ino Shikacho group, though I am surprised they would leave Ino, Choji and Shikamaru alone in the academy. I hope Ino don't rape one of the remaining Uchihas. After all, her and Sakura are breaking or have broke up their friendship to be with him. As they were jumping through the trees, ignoring the questioning looks everyone was giving him, Shikaku asked, "What do you mean one of the remaining Uchihas? There's only one left, and how do you know about them?" Kage snickered and said, "If you say so about the Uchiha, but I will tell you this, there are more than a few people in Konoha gathering information. Mr. Nun Case gets reports on what's going on in Konoha all the time just so that way he won't look like an idiot when he comes back, and also to keep up with all his properties he owns, and he suspects a few others, making everyone look at him." Kakashi asked, "So what have you been up to since last time I seen you?" Kage said, "Well, Kakashi, if you really want to know, I have been busy collecting bounties and a few other jobs for Mr. Nun Case, though I am wondering why the old man would send such a team just to ask me to come see him, as he acted all innocent." Guy said, "We were requested at the request of the council and the Hokage to come to Konoha." Kage stopped and said, "Angel, be a dear and head to the next mission, and if our information is correct and he tries to kill the leader of the village, assassinate the bastard and continue with the plan." Angel said, "Right," as she jumped off of his shoulder, turning human and taking off into the woods. Shikaku asked, "Who was that?" Kage said, "That, my friends, is Angel. She belongs to a small clan that is hidden somewhere, but out of respect for them I won't tell. I saved her life when I was 5 by giving her my blood to heal her body because I have a couple of bloodlines and one is increased healing. In return, her clan taught me the secret of their shapeshifting jutsu and also made her my personal concubine, slave wife, though we are really close friends and we refuse to do anything until I find a woman I was hoping to ask to be my wife." Kakashi asked, "Why would you have more than one wife?" Kage smirked and said, "Clan restoration. I am the last member of my bloodline, so it falls on me to restore my clan, so I get to practice polygamy." Everyone looked around and Kage said with his back to the group, "Guy, I can tell from the look on your face you're about to shout some shit about youth, and if you do I will shove Konoha's secret modified Rasengan Taijutsu 1000 years of bleeding roids up your ass," making everyone look at him. Shikaku narrowed his eyes and Inoichi said, "How can you see the look on his face when your back is turned?" Kage said, perhaps I just have a Kage Bunshin in the trees watching in case this was an ambush, and it dispelled relaying the info to me," with a smirk hidden behind his mask. Shikaku sighed and said, "We should be returning to Konoha." Kage nods and they take off through the trees, and after about 30 minutes Kakashi asked, "What was that you and Angel were talking about earlier?" Kage smirked and said, "Oh, just a businessman that has caught the attention of my group. He goes to places that are having a sudden economic boom because of either good harvest or something like that, and then he buys into the politics in the area until he owns the police and most of the businesses. He then starts using mercs to take over the country and force people to do his bidding and publicly executes anyone who opposes him. He then sells the children into slavery and have the adults working for him. A real jackass." Shikaku asked, "Has this guy been in business long?" Kage said, "From what we are told, at least the last 10 years. Kakashi asked, "Then how come we never heard about this guy?" Kage said, "I'm sure you have heard of him, but you have only heard about the business fronts that he has. He has a habit of hiring missing nin to do his dirty work, and then after it's done he goes and assassinates them with around 200 or 300 mercs to keep from paying, and since most of the mercs die before they kill the missing nin, he only has to pay a fraction of what he would have paid." Shikaku said, "That would be an effective way about it, and since missing nin die all the time and never get turned in." Kage stopped and looked to the right and said, "Shit." Everyone looked at him and Kage said, "Kage Bunshin Dai Bakua," and 25 Kage Bunshins appeared and all of them said, "Henge," and turned into birds. Everyone got into a defensive formation, and Kage, who still was ignoring him, started doing hand signs, and the Kage Bunshin jumped off the tree limbs they were on when Kage said, "Futon Hio no Kage Jutsu," and a breeze blew through the area and the birds took off flying, and Kage stood still looking at the area his clones flew toward. Kakashi asked, "What was that about?" Suddenly a blast was heard, followed by several others, and screams of pain could be heard, and Kage said, "A group of bandits had some kid kidnapped and were beating him," as he took off toward where the explosions came from. Everyone followed him, and after about a quarter of a mile they came across a clearing that was pretty much blown to hell with men laying everywhere hurt on the ground, and Kage walked by them and over to the kid and said, "Are you alright, kid?" The boy looked up and Kage said, I'm not going to hurt you, kid. Are you seriously hurt anywhere? The kid said, my arms, I can't feel them and my chest hurts. Cage nods and said, sorry about this. And suddenly the kid's shirt was ripped off and Cage started doing hand signs and his hands turned green and he started to run his hands across the kid's chest and said, you got a few bruised ribs but none of them are broke. Your shoulders are dislocated and I am not good enough with medical jutsu to heal you but I can get you to Konoha to a hospital. You got a name, kid? The kid said. Chen. Cage nods and reaches for his mask and pulls it to the side a little and said, look into my eyes, Chen. Chen looked and slowly his fell and he passed out. Cage put his mask back over his face and everyone was looking and Guy asked, what was that? Cage said, forced hypnosis. I just had him pass out so he won't feel the pain of us traveling to get back to Konoha. The bastards her also punctured a lung and I healed it but he needs a hospital fast. Guy, can I make a request? Guy said. Sure. Cage said. Drop the weights and get this kid to a hospital fast. If the blood stays in his lunges he could die in a day or two and you're the fastest here besides me but I am still tired from fighting Sasori recently so I can't make it fast enough. As he picked up the boy and Guy undid his weights after getting a nod from Kakashi and took the kid before taking off fast. Cage looked around and said, okay boys, let's have a little talk. Why did you have that kid? One of the three men who were not dead but burned badly said, I won't talk. Cage said, fine, then I guess I can kill you and the other two who are alive instead of taking you to a hospital and have the Hokage of Konoha decide your fate. As he pulled out a kunai. Another one screamed, wait. We were told to kidnap the kid for ransom. Cage said, who is that kid and who are you working for? The man who screamed a moment earlier said, he's the nephew of Daimyo Uchiha of Marsh Country. We were given the contract by our boss Genghis Rill. Cage asked, what was the ransom? The man said, I don't know. We are only low-level mercs and only follow orders. Cage nods and said, well I am a man of my word. As he started doing hand signs and his hand turned white and he reached down and touched the man who answered on the side where he was bleeding and the man screamed out in pain and passed out. He then walked toward the next and Shikaku's shadow stopped him and said, what are you doing? Cage starts walking shocking everyone and said, each of these men will die in an hour from blood loss. I don't have enough medical experience to heal them but I do know a jutsu that will stop the bleeding by cauterizing the wounds. That is what I am doing. As he reaches down and touches the next man and then over to the last after Shikaku removed his shadow. Shikaku asked, how were you able to still move when I had my shadow on you? Cage created 3 Kajbunshians and had them pick up the man and took off into the trees with the others following and said, simple. What does my name mean? Shikaku thought a moment and said, to remove shadow. Cage smirked and said, I created that name because one of my favorite jutsu is shadow clones. I also created the jutsu I used to break free. Your Cage main jutsu works by grabbing the shadow and controlling them, however I learned that I could expel small burst of chakra out of my chakra points and cancel the effect. It was the 11th jutsu I created and is also good to fight a Hyuga with. Everyone looked at him and Kakashi asked, how do you know so many of Konoha's jutsu? Cage said, my father was a Konoha nin and left me with a lot of jutsu scrolls. I have also had some great teachers. Without looking back. Everyone seemed to listen and think for a while and Cage finally asked after 20 minutes of silence, so why is Danzo really trying to get me to Konoha and don't say it's the council? Danzo runs 3/4 of the council not counting the clan heads so I know that the only way that you would request me to come is for him to want it. The old man trusts me because of my connection to Naruto. As he kept jumping through the trees. Inoichi asked, what do you mean? Cage said, ever since you guys found me at the bounty check-in station we have had 6 whole unit of Root Anbu following us and they're not the normal lackeys he's been sending. They're his elites and 24 of his top ninja is definitely overkill. Kakashi asked, how can you be sure of that? Cage said, summon Pakun and have him hide and wait for about 20 minutes. He should see them and return to you to tell you I'm right. Kakashi thought a moment and Inoichi said, do it Kakashi, if he's right this is a trap and he seems to be able to see a great distance somehow. Kakashi nods and goes through some hand signs and summons Pakun and grabs him and Cage said, long time no see Pakun. Don't tell anyone who I am but Kakashi got something he needs you to do. Pakun asked, why should I listen to you? Cage said, ask Avacline when you return to the summon world. You will find out your answers. Pakun was wide-eyed and said, fine, but if this is some trick I will tell immediately. What is it you need, Kakashi? Everyone was quite a moment and Kakashi said, Arachnar Cage here said there are 6 unit or root Anbu following us and he wants you to hide for about 20 minutes to prove if he's right or not. If he is, then come back and tell us yes or no. Pakun looks at Cage one time and said, fine. And he jumps off a tree branch and goes hides. Kakashi asked, what was that about back there, Cage, and what right do you have to tell a summon what he or she can and can't do for their summoner? Cage said, Kakashi, Avacline is the goddess of all summons. She has the ability to cancel and make all contracts for humans and summons. She answers only to 3 beings in all of creation. One is Kami himself, another is the Shinigami, and the third is the king of demons. To those who have made deals with any of the 3, you have certain privileges allowed to you. As he ducked under a branch. Asuma asked, so does that mean you have been given privileges from one of them? Cage said, no. All 3. As he stops and Pakun appears and said, Kakashi, he's right and I will listen to you, your majesty. Looking at Cage. Everyone was listening and Kakashi asked, what the hell's going on? Cage said, I don't have time to answer your questions right now, but I want you all to head to Konoha while I pull them away and don't tell anyone what you have seen or heard. I plan to come to Konoha soon, but I will do it on my own terms. I don't want to see any of your kids growing up without their parents, and the old man would kill me if I let anything happen to Asuma. Kakashi said, so that leaves me. Cage said, no Kakashi, it doesn't. I need you to go back to Konoha and deliver this scroll to the address on it. Handing a scroll to Kakashi. Kakashi asked, what is it? As he looked at it. Cage said, it's a message for the Sandaime Hokage about a possible alliance with another hidden village. I was told to deliver it when I went to Konoha again. Everyone looked at each other and Shikaku asked, why are you doing this? Cage sighed and said, I'm just protecting those who are precious to me. Even if they don't know I'm doing it. As he jumps back toward the way he just came from. Everyone looked at where he was going and said, I don't know who he is, but one thing is for sure. I want to find out. Kakashi looked at Pakun and asked, what was that about and why did you call him Lord? Pakun said, all I can tell you, Kakashi, is that you will do well not to cross him because he has strong backing. I was told he has a deal with the Shinigami and Kami. Kakashi said, he said he also has one with the king of demons who everyone knows as Kyuubi. Pakun thought a moment and said, he does, but it's with the old one. And went up in smoke. In Lightning Country, Kisame looked over at Nan and said, what's your problem? Nan looked back at him and asked, what do you mean? Kisame said, for the last few days you have been looking off into the distance like you're worried about something. It's him, isn't it? Nan looked confused and asked, what do you mean, Kisame? Kisame looked at her and said, look, Nan. I know we don't talk much, but you have become the closest thing I have ever had to a family in the last 6 months. I told you about my life and you told me a lot about yours, and I have come to look at you like a niece. I also know you have been thinking about Naruto. You talk in your sleep. Nan got red-faced and looked away and said, HNN. Kisame sighed and said, just tell me what's wrong. Nan was quiet for a few minutes and sighed before saying, I just got a bad feeling something's going to happen to him and I have some questions I want answered by him. Kisame sighs and said, he will be fine. He's stronger than all of us. Nan said, he is also only one person and from his memories not always the brightest person around. Kisame nods and said, then let's do what he asked us to do and pray that your feelings are wrong. Let's go because Samahata needs to eat. As he pulled his sword off his back. Nan looked around at the 6 dead lightning nins and said, it did not get enough with these chumps. Kisame said, hey, it's not my fault they decided to grope you and you opened a can of female justice on them. I only killed them to put them out of their misery. You castrated them with a kunai after you used the harem jutsu on them. Nan chuckled and said, I have to admit he is a genius about creating unusual jutsu and going through his memories gave me quite a few of them. Kisame sighed and said, I was mad that I could not do the Rasengan. Nan held out her hand and formed a Rasengan and said, yeah. It takes a level of control that most can't achieve. Let's go. We still need to find this Yugito girl. As she took off and Kisame shook his head and followed. Kage stopped in a clearing and said, "Okay, assholes. Why are you following me?" Just then 24 ninjas circled him, all doing hand signs and a shout of Kinjutsu, Kingoku no Bakiatari, and suddenly a blinding light shot into the field and Kage cried out in pain and took off running as fast as he could while holding his head. One of the men said, "After him." And they started to move when Kakashi appeared and said, "I don't think so." And he uncovered the Sharingan attacking two of the men. Suddenly one of the men pulled out a kunai and stabbed his partner. Asuma appeared with trench knives and killed two as another 5 had a hand of shadow climb up their bodies, breaking their necks. A giant hand came out of the woods and grabbed 4 of the men and crushed them. As the men fought back, they soon found out why this group were all called the elites of Konoha. Kakashi taking men outright and left with jutsu. Asuma using his trench knives to kill them, and the Inoshika Cho group using teamwork quickly killed all the men. After the battle was over, Kakashi looked around and said, "Does anyone know which way he went?" Asuma said, "I think he was heading toward the west, but I can't be for sure." Kakashi sighed and quickly summoned Pakun and said, "Pakun, Arankar Kage tried to save us from an ambush of some root members and they used some jutsu on him. I need you to follow his scent and lead us to him." Pakun was silent a moment and said, "Follow me," as he took off following the scent. They followed him for about an hour and came upon the valley of the end, and Pakun said, "I lost his trail at the river." Pakun sniffed the ground and asked, "What was the jutsu they used on him?" Inoichi said, "It's an interrogation jutsu. It locks away a person's mind and makes them forget everything until they come into contact with something that triggers a memory, either a person or place usually. It's used on prisoners who are too dangerous to put in prison but too important to kill." Kakashi sighed and said, "Let's go back and inform the Hokage of what's going on." As they turned and left each in thought. Several miles downstream, a blonde-haired boy with whisker marks on his face was seen crawling out of the river, and he was only about 8 or 9 years old, and he looked around and asked, "Where am I? Who am I?" as he tried to find something that told who he was. He noticed all of his cloths were too big for him and he was hungry and tired. He sighed and said, "Perhaps a nap." And he fell asleep.